The story begins with Xiaoyong, our protagonist, in a very critical situation, hanging over a cage full of zombies. His former partner, who betrayed him, mocks him and reminds him that all his friends have died and that he will be next. At that moment, Xiaoyong feels a deep guilt for having trusted her and longs for her to suffer a painful death. The real villain is our protagonist's ex-girlfriend, who, upon finding a new, more powerful and rich boyfriend, has asked him to eliminate him. That's how a burly man, accepts the task and proposes to torture the protagonist slowly so that his woman can enjoy the show before finishing him off. And as if that wasn't enough, that man with a sarcastic tone thanks Xiaoyong for the supplies, which will ensure him comfort for several months. That's how, in a matter of seconds, our protagonist falls into the cage of zombies who attack him without mercy. Tied up and suffering, the protagonist can only scream while dreaming of taking revenge on his ex-girlfriend, named Kinji, and the burly man Li Chuan, mentioning that if he is ever presented with a second chance, he wouldn't hesitate for even a second. But suddenly, Xiaoyong wakes up and hears Kinji demanding explanations for not having included her name in the deed of the house, thus questioning his love for her. While trying to compose himself, he realizes that he might have returned before the apocalypse. In his past life, Kinji deceived him, stealing his parents' inheritance and leaving him on the street. During the global apocalypse that turned people into zombies, our protagonist, with the help of his friends, managed to survive and establish a safe haven with enough resources for several months. And at that moment, Kinji reappeared, feigning despair and seeking a place to take shelter, thus regaining Xiaoyan's sympathy, who soon realized it was a mistake to trust her, who the following night opened the shelter doors to her enemies. Furthermore, the traitor demanded 400,000 yuan and the house as the price to marry her. Acting arrogantly, sure that Xiaoyan was captivated by her beauty and did not see her true character. But this time things would be different, since the protagonist will not allow this evil person to manipulate him, although he knows he must act cautiously so as not to raise suspicions, since if he lets himself be carried away by rage at this time, it could be detrimental. Kinji gave him a week to fulfill her demands, because otherwise the wedding would be cancelled. But unexpectedly, Xiaoyan kicked Kinji out of his house, assuring her that he understood the situation. Kinji, surprised by the protagonist's unexpected attitude, did not understand the change in his behavior. But now that he had gotten rid of the traitor, Xiaoyan realized that there was only 1 month left until the apocalypse, so he needed to prepare urgently. At that moment, the protagonist received a notification, similar to those of a video game. After activating the apocalypse system, Xiaoyan received a mission called Preparation for the Apocalypse that asked him to acquire land and accumulate enough resources for a year. By completing this mission, he would earn 10 points that he could use to obtain rewards. In the system store, Xiaoyan was eager for the bonus and wondered what he could acquire in the store. Although it was not yet clear what items were available, the system store offered mainly loot boxes and potions to increase physical strength. However, what worried Xiaoyan the most was his hunger, so he decided to order a fancy dinner for delivery. He remembered how in his previous life, he had had to save every penny to finance his girlfriend's whims, leaving him in a precarious situation. This time, he was not going to limit himself, since with the apocalypse about to break out and zombies everywhere, he had to take advantage of the delicious food while he could. A few hours later, the delivery arrived, and our protagonist would never have allowed himself a 3-star order, so he decided to start with a 300 yuan pork stew. After surviving on basic foods during the apocalypse, that meal seemed like a true delicacy. Our protagonist did not stop there and continued to devour enthusiastically. When he was about to finish, his phone began to ring. It was Chella, Kinji's friend, who had already discussed the matter with her, who began to furiously scold him about how he dared to treat Kinji that way. Chella insisted that he should demonstrate his love with a gift of property, or else he could not claim that he loved her. According to Chella, Kinji was testing him, and he had failed. Chella warned him that if he didn't bring her the deed to the house and 1,000,000 yuan in cash as an apology, she wouldn't help resolve the misunderstanding, which could result in a breakup. Frustrated by Chella's attitude, Shou Yin thought it would be better to get rid of her. Despite Chella's attempts to protest, the protagonist hung up the call, tired of people who were only interested in his money. At that moment, his priority was to find and buy a suitable piece of land. He wanted to build a robust fortress that was not only easy to defend, but was also close to a water source and a forest. The next morning, he arrived at a real estate agency. He was immediately greeted by a consultant who asked if he was here to rent or buy a house. Shou Yin clarified that he was not interested in either of those options. He was looking for something much more valuable. Right at that moment, a sales manager approached and asked the consultant, Xiao Ning, to help move some boxes, since they had received a large shipment of toilet paper. That day she tried to explain that she had a client, but she failed to convince anyone. The manager Sung did not consider Shou Yin to be a real client. He even reprimanded his employee for forgetting everything he had taught her. Convinced that being a good real estate agent requires charisma, he sent her to the backyard and told Shou Yin that, since he looked like a failure in cheap clothes, probably he couldn't even afford to buy a toilet, so he didn't deserve to be treated as a client. The protagonist was annoyed by the manager's dismissive attitude, who looked at others with superiority. So he asked the manager to repeat his comments and explain his contempt. With an arrogant attitude, the manager replied that he considered himself superior to people like Xiaoyan, and in a provocative gesture, said that if he could afford to buy a toilet, he would eat excrement live. Seeing Xiaoyan's expression, the manager soon realized he would regret his words, to which the protagonist in response suggested that he look for fresh excrement later, and announced loudly that he was not here to rent or sell a house, but to acquire a piece of land. The other clients were surprised to see someone so wealthy as to buy a property, and immediately Miss Xiao Ning invited the protagonist to sit down for a detailed presentation, while manager Sung watched with distrust, doubting Xiaoyan's ability to pay. This is how she showed all the available plots, but Shou Yin was already clear about what he wanted. He just had to specify his requirements and see if they found something suitable. Shou Yin wanted land near mountains and water, ideally with running water. It would also be perfect if there were factories or large buildings in the area. To find a suitable option, Xiao Ning needed some time, but soon manager's son approached again from behind. As if he had a penchant for doing so, he thought the land that met all the requirements was in the Eastern District. However, Xiao Ning thought it was a bad idea, since that area belonged to the city of T, which had many unfinished factories and pending projects. So, that property would not be attractive to clients. However, the manager was convinced that Shou Yin, who in his eyes looked like a failure, with unrealistic demands, was not here to buy land, but to cause problems. But the protagonist was not worried about the location of the land, as long as it met his requirements. The unfinished factories were not a disadvantage either. Rather, they represented an advantage. After reviewing everything, Xiaoyan decided that the land was just what he needed, and thought that with barbed wire, the property would be easy to protect, and the unfinished factories would save him a lot of time and money in construction. So he proceeded to buy the land, willing to sign the contract and pay instantly. Xiao Ning was in shock. She couldn't believe that someone in their right mind would want to acquire land with unfinished factories. But Shou Yin stood firm and asked her to hurry the process, because there was someone who couldn't wait to eat fresh manure. Soon manager Sung had the check in his hand, unable to believe that this beggar was willing to pay 300,000 for one land with abandoned factories. But in that, Shou Yin reminded him before leaving that he had completed the payment, and now it was his turn to do his part. The other clients, amused by the situation, began to pressure the manager to hurry up, since the live broadcast had already started. One of them, although a little disgusted, promised that at least the manure would be fresh, since he had just eaten some shrimp. On the other hand, the protagonist had already completed the first step by buying the land, and now he needed to find money for supplies. Upon leaving the real estate agency, he was recognized by Li Chuang, who was surprised to see the chaos that was unfolding. Inside, the staff and the clients were forcing manager Sung to fulfill his promise, while he desperately asked for help and begged not to have to eat manure. Meanwhile, Kinji was busy painting her nails and enjoying her carefree life. But then she received a call from Li Chuang, who informed her about the purchase of the land by Shou Yin. Kinji, surprised by this, couldn't believe where he had gotten so much money. Li Chuang discovered that Shou Yin had paid 300,000, probably using the money he had saved for his house, which enraged her greatly. Although Li Chuang advised her to calm down and talk to Shou Yin to understand the situation, she was too angry to do so and planned to expose him on social media. Meanwhile, the protagonist was worried about the cost of supplies and the construction of his base. All his quiet thoughts were interrupted by a frantic knock on the door. It was Kinji along with her friend. She was still furious that he dared to spend her money, but Shou Yin still couldn't understand what she was talking about. Kinji, on the other hand, continued to think about exposing him, claiming that he had used the money from the engagement price to buy land. That money belonged to her, and since he had bought the land with it, it also belonged to her. The protagonist didn't even know how to respond to the madness of that woman. Finally, he decided to explain things in a way that even a fool like she could understand. He had a lot of money, but he was not going to spend a single penny on her. Furthermore, he told her that he knew about her romance with Li Chuang. Kinji didn't understand what was happening and how he knew all that in that. Her friends, seeing how things were developing, suggested that everyone calm down and resolve this little misunderstanding as couples. But Xiaoyan wasn't going to waste his precious time with those two. So, he made it clear to her that there was no misunderstanding, since he knew that Kinji was the girlfriend of Li Chuang's fat old man. After a confrontation, the door was slammed in Kinji's face, who didn't understand how he knew about her relationship with Li Chuang, since they had always been discreet. When renting rooms, her friend didn't understand either why she hadn't informed her directly about these matters, although Kinji claimed that it was not a serious relationship and that they had only rented rooms occasionally. The situation was still confusing for her. In the midst of such a chaotic situation, they had no other option but to return home and rethink their strategy, since her friend had made a mistake with Shou Yin. On the other hand, Chella was not going to stop and was determined to win the affection of Xiaoyan. Considering that both are friends, the next day, Shou Yin arrived with a construction team to rehabilitate a factory and wondered how long the work would take. The foreman Li explained that it would be necessary to reinforce the walls, build protective towers, install barbed wire fences, reinforce the armored steel doors, and add bulletproof glass, which would take time. The foreman Li also wondered what kind of power had offended Shou Yin to need such a level of security. Shou Yin warned him not to ask too many questions, since knowing too much was not convenient. Our protagonist wanted to know if the construction could be completed in a month. The foreman replied that it would not be possible in that time frame, although many would be willing to try, mentioning that the safety and well-being of the workers were important. Li surprised Shou Yin, who thought the problem was only economic. Shou Yin immediately requested the budget, and calculated that if the project was to be completed in a month, the workers would have to work non-stop, which would imply a six-figure cost. The total price would be 20 million, and they requested an advance of 5 million to start immediately. But that option was not entirely convenient for our protagonist. He wanted the work to start immediately and promised to transfer the money within a week. The construction company did not have to worry about the payment, since if he didn't make it, the land would become theirs. But suddenly in that Shuya arrived at the construction site, she defiantly hugged Xiaoyan's arm and asked him what he was doing here. The protagonist was tired of this woman, since in his past life, she and Kinji had excluded him from his parents' inheritance, and this time he was determined to make her pay dearly. All her attempts were in vain, although trying to act in a friendly manner. He could see her true nature. In that, she asked if this is the land he had bought, and if he would build a big mansion, to which the protagonist immediately pushed her from his side and told her that what he decided to build here was none of her business. She couldn't understand what was going on, since when did that loser behave so strangely, since normally a simple touch of her arm was enough to make him blush and accelerate his pulse. But today none of that worked. The protagonist, for his part, coldly walked away and began to give instructions to the workers about the mistakes they were making, pointing out that the door needed to be widened. Chuya, seeing the golden opportunity slipping away, knew that since Kinji had messed everything up with her maneuvers, she had to move in and the land had to be hers. Shou Yin returned to his home and began to think about how to get more money. After mortgaging his house to the bank, he only managed to get a loan of 3,000,001, an amount that was not enough, even for the first phase of construction. However, he reflected that since the apocalypse was imminent, selling the house to a few people would not be a big problem. It was something that he should resolve soon. At that moment, the annoying old neighbor grandfatherly knocked on the door. Old Manly, a wealthy owner of the first and second floors of the building, had tried, unsuccessfully by the third floor from Shoyin. As retaliation, he had been doing unpleasant things, like painting doors, throwing garbage, placing coffins, and jamming locks just to bother him. Now he was complaining, falsely, that Shoyin had caused noise from a party the night before, when in reality the protagonist had gone to bed early. Knowing that the old man wanted his house, Shoyin decided to sell him the property. The old man couldn't believe it. Shoyin made a condition. He wanted to stay in the house 6 months longer. Well, he found a new place, and he had to transfer immediately 5 million to his account to cover the deposit for the new house. The old man Lee accepted the condition, but demanded a contract to avoid unexpected changes. Shoyin agreed, and was determined that the old man would face the consequences. During the apocalypse, with the transfer of 5 million and the loan from the bank, Shoyin gathered a total of 8 million. Now it was time to complete the next task and claim his reward. The largest supermarket was ideal for this mission. Shoyin began to carefully stock up with supplies for the next year. The people around him looked at him as if he were crazy and preferred to stay away. But finally he headed to the checkout line, dragging a large number of supermarket carts. The people around him did not understand why Shoyin was buying so many things. They simply laughed at him, considering him another gullible person who was being carried away by rumors about the apocalypse and the end of the world. But the opinions of others did not matter to him at all. The crucial thing was that Shoyin had completed the task assigned by the system and had earned 10 points. Among all the options in the system store, the supply box cost 10 points. And Shoyin did not hesitate to spend all his points on it. The purchase was successful, and he received the mysterious box. Upon opening it, he discovered a level 1 spatial ring that granted him a subspace of 500 cubic meters. In addition, time stopped within that space, which guaranteed that the stored objects would not deteriorate. This was an extremely valuable acquisition, and along with a new object, he also received a new mission. He had to accumulate 10 years of provisions to fulfill it. This mission offered a reward of 20 points. However, at that moment, the supermarket's head of security made an urgent call to him. That man named Yang Tao had received reports about a problematic customer. It turned out that the protagonist recognized this guy, since Yang Tao had attended the same institute as Shoyin and was known for being a local thug who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Immediately, Yang Tao demanded that he return the items he had bought, warning that he would not be understanding if he did not. Shoyin replied that he was not going to return anything, pointing out that as a customer, he was entitled to what he had paid for, which Yang Tao insisted the protagonist pay for the items immediately, threatening severe consequences if he did not. After an hour of calculation, it was determined that the total of the items in the supermarket was 56,000 yuan. When Yang Tao demanded immediate payment, Shoyin did not hesitate to use his credit card to cover the amount, handling it with confidence. The transaction went smoothly, surprising the head of security. But before leaving, Shoyin asked Yang Tao to apologize publicly, or else he would return all the items. Although Yang Tao thought Shoyin was looking for trouble, there were numerous witnesses who backed the protagonist and had seen the whole situation. The incident was recorded on video, and Shoyin used the material as a threat, warning Yang Tao that he would make it viral on the internet if he did not apologize. In addition, Shoyin promised him that if the apology was genuine, he would be willing to shop at that place, multiplied by 10, and told him that if he doubted his word, he could bring the machine to show him his bank balance. When Yang Tao saw the 7 million in the account, he couldn't believe it. Shoyin only demanded an apology to continue shopping, while the head of security struggled with his pride. However, the pressure was too much, and he ended up surrendering and apologizing. As he left, Shoyin advised Yang Tao to be more cautious in the future, since you never know how a situation can change. Then Yang Tao, with a false attitude of kindness, asked why Shoyin was buying so many things, to which he replied that it was none of his business, and that he was planning a big project. Yang Tao, understanding the opportunity, suggested that the items in the supermarket's warehouse were not enough for a large business, and recommended Shang, a wholesaler with whom he was in contact, since he worked in the supermarket. This is how Yang Tao contacted Shang and informed him that he had found an important client. Shou Yin realized that some people never change, and seeing that Yang Tao and Zhang continued to collaborate, he could only wonder how much they were scamming the supermarket. Soon they arrived at the wholesale warehouse. A luxurious car approached with an air of superiority. Seeing Shang's arrogant attitude, the protagonist noticed that he had probably never been deceived and decided to correct that. Although Shang did not immediately recognize Xiao Yin, Yang Tao reminded him that they had been classmates in high school. After a moment, Shang remembered the protagonist as someone of character. Although he despised his simple clothes, Shang hated those who pretended to be rich without actually being so, and seeing Shou Yan's appearance, he assumed he was not a person of importance and got annoyed with Yang Tao for introducing him to a client that he considered insignificant. So without hesitation, he kicked him as a reprimand for wasting his time with people who were not worth it. Shang was not willing to accept that possibility, since with his vast experience in the business world, he thought he could identify rich people just by looking at them. Calling Shang illiterate unleashed his anger, who confronted him demanding that he repeat the offense. Although Shou Yin was not fazed and reiterated the insult, he soon realized that what really bothered Shang was not the contempt, but the term illiterate. Yang Tao, seeing that the tension was rising, intervened to warn Xiao Yin not to provoke Shang any further, since he really hated being called that. However, in doing this, Yang Tao received another kick and more insults from Shang, who was frustrated that he couldn't do what he wanted. So very angrily, he presented Shou Yin with a choice. Either he bought a truckload of goods, or he crawled on the ground, to which the protagonist was pleased with the proposal, and ordered Shang to take off his jacket, and gave him the account number. In an instant, the angry expression on Shang's face transformed into astonishment. Shou Yin had transferred 1 million to his account. Although it was only a deposit, his intention was to buy merchandise for a total value of 5 million. Immediately Zhang asked what kind of products he needed, to which Shou Yin replied that he required oil, rice, salt, snacks, and drinks. In other words, products that could not spoil quickly. Zhang, with a barely visible smile, gave him this, an opportunity to get rid of a batch of food, almost expired. Upon arriving at the warehouse with the cargo, Zhang offered Shou Yin to take all the merchandise, with a 10% discount on the wholesale price. The offer seemed attractive, but Shou Yin soon suspected that Shang was not willing to sell the food at such a low price without some trick. So he decided to inspect the quality of the products and discovered that although they looked new, they were almost at their expiration date. Although Shang tried to offer a 50% discount, Xiaoyan rejected the offer, preferring to use the 5 million to acquire better quality food. Finally, they reached an agreement. Xiaoyan would buy the almost expired food at half price, with deferred payment in 1 month. Sam couldn't believe what Shou Yin was saying, since he told him that he was willing to mortgage his house to acquire the almost expired food. But Sam didn't understand why Shou Yin needed those products, to which he told him that very soon they would have great value. But the protagonist, without going into more detail, asked Shang to send the merchandise to the address provided. At that moment, he received a call about the sale of his house, and quickly said goodbye to San and Yang Tao. The buyer was an old man named Mr. Giant, who offered an advance of 400,000 and gave Shou Yin 3 months to move out. Although everything seemed to be going very well, Shou Yin felt somewhat distrustful. He asked the old man why he was in such a hurry, and he explained that his granddaughter was about to change schools and needed a new home, and the protagonist was the only one who was selling a house in the neighborhood. The old man, being so honest, provided him with all the information, which Shou Yin asked if he was not afraid that he could use that information to increase the price. The old man, upon realizing his mistake, panicked and begged the protagonist not to do that, since it was all he had saved. However, Shou Yin was not of those who would take advantage of people's good faith. He assured him that the deal would continue, and then he signed the contract. The old man was delighted, because now his granddaughter would have a place to live. He was so courteous and kind that. He even apologized to Xiaoyan for interrupting his work, realizing how honest and kind the old man was. The protagonist thought that he and his granddaughter would not last long in the apocalypse, and that he called the old man, who was already leaving, and asked for his address. Shortly after the protagonist arrived at his land, where the construction was progressing well. Upon informing the foreman that payment would be made soon, he became interested in the progress of the work. It turned out that almost 80% of the construction was finished, with the walls and doors reinforced, exactly as he had requested. And the warehouse based in the factory was ready to use, which this was excellent news. So Xiaoyan immediately called Sean and asked him to bring the supplies as soon as possible. This is how the warehouse, set up as a fortress for the apocalypse, began to fill up with resources. Under the strict instructions of the protagonist, everything was prepared for the afternoon. When the workers left, Xiaoyan was finally able to assess the work done. Everything was as planned, and now he could relax. At the same time, the system sent a notification, indicating that the protagonist had successfully completed the task, which awarded him 20 system points. Upon opening the system store, he found a box with unlocked abilities, and decided to buy it. Upon opening it, he received the level 1 Mind's Eye ability, which allowed him to detect hostility in others. Xiaoyan was satisfied, since he considered that this ability would be very useful in the early stages of the apocalypse. In addition, the system gave the protagonist a new mission. He had to get a large number of weapons. However, this did not worry him, since it was exactly what he had in mind. So he headed to the darkest area of the city to prepare for what was coming. And in a matter of seconds, the protagonist was in the bustling black market at night in the dark sector of the city, surrounded by transactions and noise. Suddenly, in that he ran into a man who looked familiar. It was Kinji's lover. This man was aggressively trying to lower the price of some fake jewelry, and finally got the seller to accept his offer. Xiaoyan did not expect to meet him that night, but it was not surprising that guy was interested in fake jade bracelets, given that the witch Kinji was naive enough to be deceived by fake gifts. A few steps away, he found a stall that offered some promising weapons, sharp blades laid out on the floor, each one more deadly than the last. As soon as he saw those blades, a smile appeared on his face. He had finally found what he was looking for. This is how. He immediately leaned in front of the vendor and asked him, without mincing words, if he had anything more forceful on offer, which this guy who had a military man look was not impressed by his question. He threw him a knife sharpener and told the protagonist to sharpen the blades himself if he needed something more robust. Adopting a more serious tone, Xiaoyan commented that none of those knives was strong enough, and what he was looking for was something much more solid. Realizing what that meant, this guy became extremely serious and asked if he was looking for trouble. However, his irritation was interrupted by a notification on his phone, since 200,000 yuan had just been transferred to his bank account, and in front of him was our protagonist holding the receipt, having sent the money through the QR code at the stall. This was his way of calming the angry seller and proving that he was a serious buyer. Finally convinced, this guy called one of his assistants to watch over the stall while he took care of the real business. His attitude towards Xiaoyan changed radically and kindly led him to another building, since discussing outside could be uncomfortable, and they had no problem accessing the building. Apparently harmless. Once inside, that guy now tried to offer Xiaoyan some homemade weapons for small targets. They cost 2,000 yuan, and the ammunition would be cheap. However, the protagonist rejected this guy's proposal, who then showed him imitation revolvers. The pistols were at 5,000 yuan each, and the bullets at 5 yuan. Although the offer was acceptable for Xiaoyan, he had already advanced 200,000 yuan, but he was not interested in that type of weaponry. Confused by this, he asked Xiaoyan what he was looking for, to which he explained that the previous transfer was only a 10% advance of a total order of 2 million yuan. Worried about the identity of the buyer, this guy asked him questions, but Xiaoyan invented a story about how his subordinates handled these purchases and made it clear that he did not appreciate inquiries about his identity. Given that the protagonist seemed serious, this man asked him to wait while he headed to another room and locked the door. Looking out the window, he assured Xiaoyan that he had found the right contact and whispered that he would take care of the matter and that he only needed an address to complete the transaction. at midnight and told him to bring the cash. Upon leaving the place, Seo-yin noticed that this guy treated him almost like a VIP. However, he returned to the night market street just when he ran into Li Chuang again, who commented on this unexpected encounter in the black market and realized why Seo-yin had been spending so much lately. It also made him think of Kinji. He assumed that she had been receiving financial advice and was now trying to sell it all to live well, but without worrying about that individual's comments. Annoyed, Seo-yin thought about testing his new ability, activating his mind's eye. A subtle aura illuminated his vision. He observed a happy face indicator above the head of the guy who attended to him, whom we will call Mr. Armament, and an angry face, one over that of Li Chuang. The ability turned out to be as useful as he expected. He decided to experiment a little more and commented negatively aloud about how he bought fake and secondhand products to deceive Kinji, and mentioned that he also considered her to be a type of secondhand trash, so it made sense that she was worth so little. Upon hearing this, the angry indicator on Li Chuang's head intensified and began to curse Xiaoyan for touching a sensitive point. Seeing the conflict, Mr. Armament intervened and asked the protagonist if the fat man was causing trouble. This is how he marked Li Chuang as an enemy. And catching the protagonist's indirect suggestion, Mr. Armament assured his new client that he and his team would take care of giving this fat guy a lesson, to which Seo-yin more than agreed, but asked him not to overdo it, since he had other plans for him in the future. Seeing a group of thugs approaching him, Li Chuang immediately began to panic, stumbling over his words and losing his arrogant attitude. Without wasting more time, Mr. Armament took out a baton, and the thugs quickly took care of the fat man, leaving him bruised and battered in the middle of the dark road. His white suit was full of shoe prints and kick marks, and this incident only increased his hatred for Seo-yin. 2 days later in the warehouse, both parties arrived on time to finalize the agreement. Seo-yin saw a truck full of suspicious boxes containing the weapons he had requested. With the arrival of the armament, he completed his mission to prepare for battle, obtaining 10 system points and increasing his total to 20. Among the boxes, he found a variety of heavy weaponry. In addition, the system awarded him an extra prize, a physical enhancement potion +2, which turned out to be twice as effective than the potions available in the store. With a satisfied smile, the protagonist injected the potion, expecting only a slight discomfort. However, the process turned out to be much more painful and unpleasant than he anticipated. As an average adult, with a physical score of 5-1 increase of +2, represented a 40% increase in his overall capacity. He then decided to review the system catalog and found another physical enhancement potion. After administering this second potion, his physical score rose to 8, thus maximizing his strength. Now he was approximately 60% stronger than an average person, and he was eager to check it out. Observing some iron bars scattered around the warehouse, Xiaoyan had the idea to test his new strength. He took one of the iron bars, used to reinforce buildings, and threw it into the air. Then he kicked it with all his strength and speed, and immediately the bar bent significantly, and the impulse made it impact against the nearby wall, leaving a large dent in it. With his new strength, his bare hands were now practically weapons in themselves. He was ready to face an early apocalypse without a problem. To prevent the newly acquired weapons from being discovered, he stored them in his spatial ring to keep them safe. He simply pointed his magic ring towards the truck, and the contents were immediately absorbed, according to his memories. The next day would mark the beginning of the apocalypse, so he didn't have much time to perform all the pending tasks. Despite all, he couldn't get the image of an old man out of his head, begging for him to buy his house with a modest sum of money that he had painstakingly gathered for his granddaughter. Despite having faced countless life situations or death and betrayals during the first apocalypse, he had always maintained his humanity and never ignored the misery of the less fortunate. And he thought that maybe he should send some essential supplies to the old man. It was the least he could do to help him and improve his granddaughter's chances of survival. As part of his plan for the apocalypse, the protagonist decided to reimburse the old man for the funds provided. The next day, he headed to a dilapidated apartment building in a depressed area of another city. Without the help of a GPS, it would have been impossible to locate this place, given how hidden and deteriorated it was. The old man had been renting in this old and cheap building without an elevator indicating that he was not in the best economic situation. Upon arriving at the door, Shoyin knew that he should take the supplies from his storage ring to avoid complications. When explaining its origin, he activated the ring, and the hallway was filled with boxes stacked to the brim. When the old man opened the door, initially he thought that Xiaoyan was the landlord, promising payment of the rent. However, upon seeing him better and seeing the boxes overflowing the hallway and extending down the stairs, his confusion increased more. But the protagonist promised him an explanation later, while they hurried to put the boxes inside, before the neighbors noticed it. After a few minutes of work, mostly done by Shoyin, all the boxes were inside. The old man was surprised to see that Xiaoyan did not seem tired at all, despite the fact that he had put in a lot of effort, and that the protagonist inspected the room and concluded that it would be a suitable emergency shelter due to the robustness of the main door. He then instructed the old man to use the supplies with caution, since they should last approximately 6 months. Just when he was about to go into more details, Xiaoyan noticed a picture in the room that surprised him. In the photo, the old man appeared proud alongside his beautiful granddaughter. To Xiaoyan's surprise, the girl in the picture was a close friend of his during the first apocalypse, named Chan. So immediately, he asked the old man if the young woman in the photo was called Chan, which confused the old man even more, since he had never mentioned her name. Xiaoyan's expression turned somber as he urgently asked the old man where the girl was, to which he replied that she was still at school. While they arranged the transfer of documents, Xiaoyan recalled how Chan had expressed her regret for having put her grandfather in a difficult situation during the early days of the first apocalypse. According to what he remembered, Chan's grandfather had risked everything to save her. In that desolate timeline, the old man had bravely ventured into her school, infested with zombies, to save her. And although he managed to rescue her, he died in the process, being a close ally from his previous life. Xiaoyan was determined to prevent Chan from facing such suffering again. So he turned to the old man and informed him that the house was no longer for sale. The old man, worried about this, thought that Xiaoyan was retracting the agreement. But what followed was even more surprising. Xiaoyan explained that the world would become a real chaos. The next day, the house at Chan's school would no longer be relevant. Instead, it was urgent to move her to a safer place. This sudden statement left the old man even more confused, which the protagonist, pressed for time, did not consider how difficult it would be for an old man to understand the apocalypse. Therefore, he used a simpler analogy, comparing the situation to a famine, to give him an idea of the gravity of the problem. Although the idea of a famine was alarming, the old man thought that such things do not happen in times of peace. Since words did not seem enough to convince the old man, Xiaoyan decided to demonstrate instead of just talking. So he stored all the boxes and objects in a storage ring, leaving the room empty and spacious, a change that the old man found amazing. Xiaoyan claimed to have special abilities and the ability to foresee the future, and asked the old man to trust him to be able to save Chan. The next step was to get the girl out of school. While they headed towards the place where Chan was, the old man looked stunned as Xiaoyan drove recklessly, trying to get there as quickly as possible. Upon arriving, they found Chan in front of an apartment building, surrounded by other students. Some jealous girls were hitting her because a boy had taken an interest in her, despite the fact that Chan insisted that she did not want to be with him and that she simply enjoyed the attention. One of the girls kicked her in the stomach for defending herself, and all of them took turns attacking her, envious of the attention that Chan received. For her beauty, the situation was escalating quickly when the old man's voice broke the chaos. Upon observing his granddaughter in such a distressing situation, all of them diverted their attention towards the grandfather, who was running towards his beloved granddaughter. The old man shouted at the out-of-control girls, demanding that they let Chan go. But at that moment, a group of unattractive thugs stood in his way, ordering the old man to step aside so that the girls could resolve the matter. Without interruptions, the thugs exhibited their weapons and knives, intimidatingly. However, the old man lunged forward despite the threats, reprimanding the thugs for their conduct. But immediately one of these raised his steel bat, pointing it at the old man's head. However, Shou Yin intervened just in time, stopping this guy's attack, and immediately looked at him with an overwhelming look, noting that they were still learning the trade. Quickly, the other two guys focused on Shou Yin, thinking that maybe he was Chan Chan's older brother, or something like that, which made him an easy target. But the thug holding the bat failed to move it, no matter how hard he tried. And without wasting time, Xiaoyan gave him a precise kick in the pit of his stomach, sending him flying into the air, as if he had been shot from a cannon. Seeing what had happened to the first one, the other two hesitated for a moment. Xiaoyan seemed to have combat training, and they mentioned that maybe if they attacked as a team, they could give him a blow. But Xiaoyan's cold and calculating gaze indicated that it wouldn't be that easy. The thug's plan consisted of one knife in front, and the other with a bat behind. The first to attack was the one carrying the bat, who jumped quickly, but the protagonist dodged the attack with ease, his new body proving to be agile. After improving his physical skills with the potions, his reaction speed had also increased. So with his new strength, he grabbed the thug who tried to hit him and threw him to the ground effortlessly. A single blow was enough for this guy to faint, probably from hitting his head against the pavement. Meanwhile, the remaining man tried to attack him aggressively, but Shou Yin diverted the weapon unperturbed and looked at him determinedly. Maintaining eye contact, he prepared his leg and gave him a hard blow on the side of the leg, leaving him bent like a tortilla. The fall ended with the blonde guy hitting the ground hard, and in seconds all of them were defeated. The only remaining problems were the girls, who tormented Chan without reason as a defender of equality. After his experience in the apocalypse, Shou Yin slapped one of them, surprising the girl with a slap so hard that made her tremble and redden her cheek. As for the other bully, since she liked to pull Chan Chan's hair so much, Shou Yin gave this woman a little bit of her own medicine and did not let her go no matter how much she begged. With a murderous look, he pulled out the knife he had obtained from the blonde guy and put it against the girl's neck. Scared by what he might do, she couldn't help but cry. Every spectator in the area heard a sharp cut and a heartbreaking scream. However, Xiaoyan didn't even blink in the first apocalypse. He did many things for the sake of survival, and those instincts remain with him. The ladies looked horrified at the result of what he had just done. The girl fell to her knees, since the protagonist had cut her hair and humiliated her in front of everyone. But still not learning the lesson, this woman yelled that she wouldn't let Shou Yin get away with it after having treated her that way. However, he paid no attention to her empty threats while looking at her with contempt, and immediately scattered the strands of hair over her head for further disrespect, and told her that he had done her a favor, since long hair would only be a burden. In the apocalypse, everyone was confused by his mysterious words, but he assured them that having short hair could save their lives in the coming days. But putting that aside, Shou Yin turned to Chan with familiarity, telling her that they had to leave now, although she did not know where to. Despite all, the old man convinced his granddaughter to get into the protagonist's car. Immediately already being in the car, her grandfather told her that she would not return to school, with a look of madness in his eyes. The old man explained that a great famine was coming, and survival had to be their priority. However, Chan did not believe him. She thought that her grandfather simply had fallen into one of those fraudulent calls. Xiaoyan watched the two argue, while the young woman worried that her grandfather had just been scammed out of some money. But the protagonist was relieved to see Chan safe and promised to protect her in her new life. Noticing that her grandfather's words had no effect, he intervened and confessed that the information about the famine had been invented by him. And that is how Shou Yin introduced himself formally, allowing Chan to call him Brother Shou Yin. She thanked him. Shou Yin seemed to have combat training, and he promised her that those guys wouldn't last long. She wondered if the famine was real, to which the protagonist admitted that he only made it up to convince her grandfather. Then, he clarified that what was really approaching was the apocalypse, the end of modern civilization. Upon hearing such an extreme statement, Shou Yin thought it was natural to feel crazy. He decided to check the news and the internet in search of signs of the end of the world. Upon taking out his phone, he saw a close-up video of a man detained by the authorities at a train station, reciting sinister prophecies about the end of days. Some people said it was rabies, and that the guy was biting other people. But the man seemed lucid enough to recite somber things about a fog with a strange smell. In the video, the detainee resisted being restrained with enough strength to break free and bite more people like a dog. It was almost total chaos from then on, as Shoyin had declared and expected. The initial signs of the apocalypse were already in full swing. Tomorrow would mark the official first day of the apocalypse, and a toxic fog would begin to cover several provinces, including Province B. All kinds of living beings will be affected by this unknown fog. It will reach a point where a significant part of the population will mutate into mindless zombies that will wander the streets in search of their next prey. As for the other part that survives the fog, they will not be spared from the cruelty of those zombies, hungry for flesh. After an agonizing death, the victim will become one of them. Chan is part of the new generation, so she should have a general idea of what zombies are like. She has some ideas based on movies and popular culture in general, but it is difficult to believe that it is really happening. But when the chaos officially starts tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or next week, everyone won't find the idea so incredible. Unfortunately, they found themselves in the middle of traffic when time was crucial to return to headquarters. It was so bad that even the emergency lane was blocked and congested. The old man was starting to get nervous, since the protagonist had just mentioned the zombies, and now they were in a static position. However, Shoyin assured him that they should be safe for now. But although the zombies could not take over everything for a few days, the possibility of a small nearby outbreak was not impossible. While traffic was stopped, suddenly a luxury car used the emergency lane to overtake everyone, and upon resuming, movement abruptly cut off Shoyin, who had to brake to avoid a crash. The protagonist was furious because the reckless driver did not respect the turn signals and endangered everyone by using the emergency lane irresponsibly. Both vehicles were trapped in the same traffic jam, and the driver of the luxury car, instead of calming down, stopped next to Xiaoyan's window and began to curse him. Very furious at that, the old man suggested avoiding problems with the reckless driver, who seemed wealthy and powerful. But Shoyin was not willing to give in. For almost an hour in traffic, Shoyin was determined to confront the driver. If he caused more trouble, when traffic finally cleared, the luxury car tried to overtake them again, indicating that the problems were not over, and was deliberately chasing them. The protagonist was really starting to get angry now, since this rich brat just wouldn't let it go. If whoever this guy was, he was surely an uncontrolled person who was putting his life and vehicle at risk just to be annoying on the road. He was deliberately bothering and provoking them, to which the old man insisted to the protagonist to just let it pass and not get involved any more sincerely. The Xiaoyan of the past might have let that guy pass, but the apocalypse is tomorrow. There would be no need to tolerate trash anymore, like that rich brat. So the protagonist played with the aggressive driver a little. He bet that the guy would chicken out at the last moment, and came out winning, since that guy almost crashed into the nearby hill. But he had the audacity to manage the situation. That very angry man immediately called the traffic police to request surveillance recordings. He wanted to track Shoyin to prove that important people should not be bothered. Meanwhile, when the three arrived at headquarters, it was already night. As soon as they got out of the car, the old man looked at the complex with his mouth open, surprised by its size, while Chan commented that the whole place seemed a bit excessive. However, Shoyin told the two to just rest, since from tomorrow, everything they believed would turn upside down. And despite what he said, our protagonist seemed quite relaxed and comfortable in front of his observation deck, with a coffee in his hand. Early in the morning, Chan had just woken up and found Xiaoyan nearby. It had been so long since she had had a good night's sleep, and not having classes in the morning was a liberating feeling, as she was already awake. It would be an excellent time to give her a tour of the fortress. They looked for the grandfather, and Shoyin showed them the facilities, highlighting that all the walls were reinforced concrete, and the doors made of solid steel 3 centimeters thick and controlled remotely. They would resist even heavy weaponry, keeping anyone even out. Whether people or zombies would be easy. Shoyin also warned that no one but the 3 of them would have access to the fortress without his permission. Upon hearing this, Chan understood that Shou Yin allowed other survivors to die outside with the zombies. However, the protagonist did not answer directly, but instead took them to another place. He explained that with the apocalypse, human nature would become even more unpredictable, and evil in people would be magnified without laws. He warned that compassion could lead them to be killed, and showed them a place he had built to protect themselves. It looked like a walled apartment complex, with multiple shipping containers scattered around, and indicated to them that, in case he was not present, and survivors came seeking help, they could be housed in this buffer zone as a temporary refuge. But he made it clear that the ban on other people in the main fortress still stood without his permission, to which the old man agreed with him. The next stop on the tour would be the food storage. He would also show them which areas of his supply place could be rationed to other people. Upon entering the warehouse, full of piles and piles of essential supplies, it seemed an absurd sight. In that Shou Yin turned around looking at them with intent. He proceeded to activate the mind's eye to check their hostility status, which showed no signs of malice. After showing them the goods, fortunately, he saw happy faces over their heads. So he thought it should be safe to assume this was a sign of trust. So he continued with the next exhibition from his storage ring, while explaining that weapons were the most important. In this apocalypse, he handed Chan a crossbow, and the old man a shotgun. He reminded them the importance of maintaining control over those weapons and prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. It was a matter of common sense to guarantee security of the weapons was crucial to avoid chaos. But suddenly, in that Shou Yin received a notification from the system about a new task. After meeting with Chan, he was assigned another mission. Now he had to find an old acquaintance named Sanchi. This news surprised Shou Yin, who upon looking at the city from the observation deck, gave an arrow that marked Sanchi's location, since he already planned to meet with old friends. This seemed like an excellent opportunity, but before leaving to fulfill his mission, he reminded the grandfather and granddaughter that they should follow the rules and not consider breaking them. When they asked where he was headed, he got into his car and explained that he was going to recruit and form a team. The large arrow indicating Sanchi's location seemed to point to a bar called KTV, which inside its facilities, a group of friends were enjoying, drinking and singing karaoke. And that Sanchi, somewhat staggering, left the room with a friend to go to the bathroom. After doing their morning needs, both came out, stumbling through the hall to continue enjoying the party. Sanchi was so drunk that he accidentally bumped into a girl who was quite annoyed. Although he apologized for this, the girl's bodyguard called him foolish and attacked him without hesitation, which made Sanchi crash against the wall. And his friend, worried about his condition, quickly approached him to see how he was. And immediately Sanchi's friend confronted the bully, demanding that he stop being violent. Annoyed by the confrontation, especially in front of the girl, that guy became enraged and lifted Sanchi's friend by the neck with great force. Seeing that the situation was getting dangerous, Sanchi tried to get up, admitted his mistake, and asked the thug not to hurt his friend. But fortunately, a member of the establishment staff, still recovering from a cold, noticed the fight. Since fights were common in the bar, due to drunk customers, he decided to intervene to calm tempers and asked both groups to calm down. However, the thug, offended by the interruption, considered this a lack of respect, since not even the owner of the establishment would dare to touch his clothes, and now the brave employee became the target of that guy's anger. And without hesitation, he gestured to Sanchi and his friend to leave quickly. In that, the thug demanded the immediate presence of the bar's boss, threatened to close the place. And even though this employee tried to smooth the situation, he was unsuccessful, while the university guys ran back to karaoke room 3090 as if they were fleeing from a wild animal, and that their friends, logically curious about what had happened, were worried about their states. Basically, they had had a confrontation with a drunk thug who had threatened them and began to tell that they were lucky that one of the employees acted quickly to calm the situation. One of their friends suggested that they should have fought, arguing that their mechanical engineering class should never give up. He wanted to call other colleagues from his department to retaliate, but immediately Sanchi stopped him, arguing that acting impulsively and looking for trouble less than a year before graduation, would be a very foolish decision, and mentioned that they should continue singing, dancing, and celebrating. But suddenly, in that the drunk thug appeared, with his entire group to seek retaliation. It seemed that they had beaten the employee to find room 3090. The guys were naturally surprised that a group of unknown thugs had just broken into their private room. But immediately, the drunk thug threw the employee like a rag doll and pointed to Sanchi and his friends, telling his men to grab everyone. The university guys did not dare to resist, for fear that the violence would escalate further. So they surrendered without further options. Seeing the fate of the beaten employee made them shudder, thinking that they would end up that way too. But in that, the mechanical engineering thug challenged the thugs, challenging them to allow him to make a call. However, in response, that guy grabbed a bottle and smashed it all over his head. And this is how the blood of the tough guy chump mixed with the liquor as it flowed to the ground, which worried Sanchi a lot. Meanwhile, outside the bar, Xiaoyan arrived in his car and was excited to reunite with an old friend from the first apocalypse. He was amused how this place resembled Sanchi's university version, but without wasting any more time, he entered the place received by the staff, remembering how despite the chaos of the world, his friend had always maintained his passion for singing. Meanwhile, inside the premises, Sanchi sees how his friend is lying on the floor. After having been hit with a bottle on the head, the thug asks his girlfriend if, after what he has done to him, she is satisfied. She tells him that she can't be completely, because it wasn't him who bumped into her, but rather it was Sanchi. Then, the thug points to him to proceed to hurt him as well. But Chung gets up from the floor, very angry, and grabs the ashtray to attack him, in response for having injured him. However, he is stopped by two of his henchmen, who hold him by the arms. The leader of the thugs approaches and, disgusted, tells him that he didn't think he had so much guts to do that. And then, he smashes another glass bottle on his head, leaving him completely knocked out on the floor. In that, Sanchi and his friend, who observed the whole situation, finally decide to engage in a fight with the thugs, except for one of them, who is cornered in a corner. Very scared, the group of bad guys decide to beat them to death for rebelling and being argumentative. But in the midst of chaos, the karaoke employee gets up from the floor and starts coughing. He observes the fight that has formed, but strangely, his eyes have turned red, and he has a different appearance. In that, he quickly lunges and bites one of the thugs, right in the shoulder. This one asks him if he has a dog complex, and asks his companions for help to get him off. In the midst of the panic, one of the other thugs decides to try to remove him, but he can't and wonders how he is so strong. Then the employee turns around and proceeds to bite him, also on the arm, knocking him to the floor, while confirming again that he has an inhuman strength. In that, our protagonist arrives, who grabs the wild employee by the neck, with hardly any effort, and slams his head against the TV, ordering everyone in the room to stop fighting. Everyone is surprised, so much so that the thug who was bitten on the arm is shocked by his great strength. Seeing how a young man no low to the neck with one hand, the leader of the thugs asks the protagonist who he is, but he ignores him and asks his friend Sanchi if he's been bitten, to which he says no. Upon hearing this show, Yin asks him to go with him, but again, the leader thug grabs him by the shoulder, reprimanding him that they have not yet finished settling accounts, in that he turns around because he sees that one of his henchmen is coughing on the floor, telling him that his head is spinning and he feels very dizzy, to which he asks him if his cold has gotten worse. In that, Xiaoyan begins to observe his shoulder, realizing that he has a bite. So he asks him if he has been bitten by the employee, and he confirms that that was the case. He quickly realizes that, judging by what he says, it is most likely that he is already infected, and worse with a bite so close to the brain. It will be a matter of time before he transforms soon. The protagonist, who still has the infected employee grabbed, throws him into a quarter and closes the door. Because luckily, zombies are so dumb that they still do not know how to open doors. After this, he asks Sanchi directly which one he wants him to dispatch for him, and this somewhat confused asks him if they know each other, to which the leader of the thugs is annoyed by wanting to sound arrogant and decides to go and hit him, but Xiaoyan quickly grabs him by the face and with incredible strength slams his head against the floor. On the other side, One of his henchmen arrives to try to attack him, but the protagonist ends up dispatching him with a good blow to the face, knocking him out instantly. The last remaining henchman approaches his partner because he can't believe that with a single blow, he has knocked him out of combat. In that, Shoyin asks everyone that if there is anyone else who is not convinced of his strength, to come and test his fists. Then orders Sanchi to take his friend with him and wait for him outside. Then the group of friends leaves the karaoke room, and behind them also the group of thugs. But the protagonist stands in front of them blocking him, and tells the group leader that he has gotten so drunk that he forgot his own name, and almost caused his friend to be killed. This one does not know what he is talking about, and asks him to step aside. But Xiaoyan does not push and decides to lock them up with his group inside the room. Finally, one of his henchmen, who was bitten, becomes a zombie and proceeds to bite him. In that, another employee of the karaoke arrives at the scene, asks the protagonist what is going on, and if he needs help, to which he tells him to lock this door immediately, because no one is allowed to enter. Then contact the police and the hospital and tell them that there is a patient with rabies in the room. The employee, upon hearing this, is somewhat confused, but the protagonist shouts for him to do it. While they leave the place, the employee feels intrigued by what is inside because there's a lot of noise. One of his colleagues arrives and asks him, to which he explains that one of the clients said that there is someone with rabies inside the room. So to kill the curiosity, the two decide to go and check the security cameras. Once they have arrived, a look of disturbance and fear invades their faces upon seeing the images where everyone has been bitten and turned into zombies, to which they ask to call the police urgently. The protagonist, who is out of the place, asks them to hurry because the area is no longer safe. Then they get into his vehicle and escape from the place. In that, Sanchi, who now out of confidence calls him brother, thanks for helping them and asks for his name. The protagonist identifies himself to the group, commenting that he was hired to protect them, and they do not need to know who hired him. One of the guys asks if this disease of rabies that he talks about is real, since he understands that it was denied on the internet, saying it does not exist. He asks if perhaps what he witnessed in the karaoke a few minutes ago was an illusion. Another one asks if there is any medicine that can cure it, but in the words of the protagonist, all this disaster has no end, and will only get worse from now on, because the world is now in apocalypse. While they are in the car, they witness how on the outskirts, the situation has changed chaotically, and the infected are attacking civilians. The current situation is just a small outbreak that has occurred in specific areas, and most of the people are still in an incubation phase. So very soon, everything will get out of control on a massive scale. So the protagonist tells the guys that if they want to survive, from now on, they should listen and do everything he says. In that, the system message appears, notifying him that the mission has been completed and he has earned 20 points. So Shoyin decides to see what are the new rewards available in the store. Upon checking, he realized that there are now 3 new boxes. One of them is the apocalyptic farmer box, which he needs to buy or spend points manually. All these boxes look useful and do not look very expensive. So once he manages to return to the fortress, he will redeem them all. However, there is still a problem. At that moment, the protagonist remembers how in his past life, Sanchi's roommate betrayed him, causing many others to die at the hands of zombies, and Sanchi was the only one who barely managed to survive such an incident, being seen as the culprit for everyone's death. This is why our protagonist wonders which of the 3 guys who are with him in the car will have been the real traitor. Changing the scene, Kinji is calling her lover, asking when he will bring the supplies he promised, because things are getting very dangerous outside, and she is too scared to go to the store on her own, to which he tells her that he will bring them soon. But right now he has to deal with something quickly. At that instant, she hears someone knock on the door very loudly, so she tells him that she's going to hang up to see who it is. Then she proceeds to check through the peephole and is relieved, since it is her friend Chella. This one notifies her that the old man Lou on the first floor was transferred to another place during the morning. Apparently a police car and an ambulance took him away suddenly. In that, Kinji thinks that this explains why there was so much commotion. In the morning, on the other hand, Chia comments that apparently the rabies that everyone is talking about is not just a tactic to scare people, so she asks her if Li Chuang has made the delivery of the supplies he promised. However, she tells her that he has not done so yet, to which she recriminates her that Min cannot be trusted, and that she asked her to call him and warn him that Shou Yin has a large reserve of supplies, which is more than enough to make a fortune during the epidemic, and that Kinji asks her how she knows of this information, to which she replies that the last time, when she was kicked out of Xiaoyan's property, she sent one of her lackeys to spy on him in secret, revealing that there are trucks that regularly deliver supplies to the abandoned factory that he has under his ownership. So they deduce that most likely is that he has already realized the epidemic long before, and that Chuya tells her that there is nothing wrong, because Li Chuang already knew about that too. So she tells Kinji to trust her and call him to do business as soon as possible and take advantage of obtaining a better profit from supplies. Already once they arrive at the shelter, they get out of the car, and Sanchi, with a surprised attitude, opines that the place is quite incredible because it looks exactly like a fortress, to which the protagonist replies that indeed, that is something everyone says the first time they get to see it. Suddenly the grandfather and Chan receive them, and the protagonist proceeds to introduce them to the new team members who will accompany them from now on. After making the formalities, he asks the grandfather to take the guys and show them the surroundings of the place, in addition to explaining the rules and regulations they must follow. And that one of the friends, who is called Jimin, asks Xiaoyan that please make assignment of some weapons, since with that they can also contribute to defend the place. However, one of his companions, upon noticing his recklessness, tells him not to be so impatient in asking for something like that, since they have just moved to the home, and they need to gain his trust first. But Shou Yin calmly tells him that after a few days, they will receive their own weapons, so there is no need to despair. For now, the priority would be to check on his other friend, who is seriously injured, and he must be taken to the medical room. After a short while, the group of guys is already settled in the shelter, and they feel very comfortable with the stay. But in that, Jimin asks his friend Cordo to explain why he got involved in his previous proposal, because if he hadn't done so, he could surely have obtained weapons to defend himself. Additionally, he opines that given the current situation, at best, they could be being protected from the imminent apocalypse, or at worst, they would now be being kidnapped in the house. In that, Cordo looks at him disapprovingly, arguing that he should not express himself that way before someone who had just saved them from a beating. In that, Jimin asks what relevant information they have of him now, to which Sanchi replies, reminding him that the protagonist had mentioned in the car that someone hired him to save them. However, Jimin, who seems not yet to be satisfied with the situation, begins to notice somewhat insecure, and tells them that that story of who hired him is surely a complete farce, so he doubts that he is even telling them the truth. Furthermore, he is not so sure of how they are treating Chan, indicating that the medical room they sent him to looks like a prison, and they could even be taking out his organs there. So with a determined look, he proposes that they attack first. In that, Cordo opines that they could also be mistaken if they reach a conclusion like that, because that would mean that they would be betraying the person who saved him. However, Jimin, with a determined look, tells him that he would rather betray the world than let the world betray him. So even if Shou Yin tells the truth, they will still take control of the fortress on their own and establish their leadership. Then, with some malice in his voice, he thinks that besides Xiaoyan, there is only an old man and a young girl in the place. So while the protagonist is away, they could take the opportunity to capture the old man and his granddaughter. Then he comments that she, referring to Chan, is a girl who looks very attractive, and perhaps they could do something about it, hinting at a disturbing aura. This makes Sanchi and Cordo perplexed by his words and uncomfortable by what he just insinuated. But Jimin breaks the mood, laughing and telling them to relax, because he was just joking with them. Sanchi suddenly sighs, commenting that what he heard was a scare, and that the apocalypse hadn't even started yet, and he was already thinking about perverse and illegal things. After the two friends leave, Jimin looks at them with a somewhat cynical look, while thinking that in chaotic times, one must be someone without mercy, and assures that once his plans succeed, he will turn his two friends into lackeys of his evil desires. Meanwhile, the grandfather along with Chan approach the protagonist with the aim of informing them that their friends have already been treated and guided to their rooms, and that the one who was quite badly injured is already resting in the medical room. That's how. The protagonist thanks him for having taken care of everything, as he was ordered, and asks them to take a well-deserved rest, because who knows what might happen tomorrow. But before they leave, he quickly reminds them to keep an eye on Sanchi's two companions, since he has a feeling that there is a hidden traitor among them. As night falls, Shoyin is alone in the shelter's warehouses and proceeds to review the items in the store, specifically the boxes he obtained during the missions. Without further delay, he begins to open them at the same time, and a large loot appears in front of his eyes. This makes him think that these rewards look quite decent. However, it's not as good as spending money freely nowadays. So once the apocalypse begins and the world's resources go, little by little, diminishing these boxes will obtain an incalculable value. The night has passed, and the next day, the sound of several cars rumbles throughout the environment, specifically 3 cars, which are positioned right at the entrance of our Clotus shelter. Then the subject gets out, who had a problem with Xiaoyan on the road that other day, because he had been very upset and resentful for having messed with him. Along with him are numerous bandits, whom he has probably hired, and orders them to start forcing the entrance to the house in a very aggressive way, seeing that they are having a hard time opening it. One of the thugs tells him that it seems that this door is made of a material very strong and thick, so with the weapons they have, they don't think it's possible to force it open. In that, the boss who hired them begins to lose patience and quickly orders them to bring the heavy armory. Suddenly, one of them takes out a trunk full of Molotov cocktails, and then they all start throwing them at the house, surpassing the metal door and setting the place on fire. Given the fire and chaos that was forming, Chan comes out with Sanchi and the boys to quickly go to extinguish the fire, and that she thinks that the protagonist was right, that the apocalypse hasn't even properly started, and already numerous extreme things are happening. On the other hand, Xiaoyan and the grandfather, equipped with rifles, approach to climb the viewpoint of the shelter to check who are the ones looking for trouble. Once they are up, the grandfather quickly notices that it is the subject with whom Xiaoyan had an altercation on the road. In that downstairs, one of the thugs notices that they are being observed and warns the boss. But this one with a haughty and aggressive voice insults him, telling him to come down and show his face, or otherwise they will burn down the whole house. Shoyin looks at him very seriously and warns them to leave the place, him and his lackeys, or otherwise something bad will happen to them. Suddenly the whole group of thugs, upon hearing the threat, get very hysterical in order to attract another trunk full of Molotovs to continue with the attack. In that, a new system notification appears to Shoyin, indicating that a new mission has been supplied. Suddenly the grandfather, who feels somewhat nervous, asks him if they should shoot into the air as a warning sign. But the protagonist doesn't seem to be comfortable with this, since the new mission that has been entrusted to him is none other than to eliminate any possible threat and protect the shelter at all costs. That is why, with a calm voice, he tells the grandfather that a few simple warning shots will not be useful at all, because those people are clearly some criminals of society, so much so that they didn't think twice and cause a fire in the place without caring if innocent people could die. That's how pointing his rifle. He makes it clear to the grandfather that leaving these human scum alive during the apocalypse will only bring them problems in the future and even harm innocent people without thinking twice. He pulls the trigger of the rifle, and with one shot, he brutally blows off the arm of the boss of the thugs, making him scream in pain and shocking everyone in the act, to which Shoyin opines that he missed a shot, because apparently he had planned to hit him somewhere else, and that having lived a few months peacefully has made him rusty a bit. The boss and all his lackeys quickly decide to retreat from the place, because they had not foreseen that the protagonist had weapons. But Shoyin, with a cold and ruthless attitude, tells them that he hates people who never finish what they start, and without thinking twice, with a squeeze of the trigger, unleashes numerous shots at them, eliminating them brutally, and that the terrified boss manages to get into the vehicle and ask them to quickly step on the gas to leave the place. However, Xiaoyan had already foreseen this and changes his weapon to an automatic rifle, then unleashes a series of bullets with such speed and precision that he leaves the grandfather totally impressed. Once all the thugs have been eliminated, the protagonist orders the grandfather to call Sanchi and the others, so they go to clean the place. But then he decides to change his mind, because he believes that they're still in the early stages of the apocalypse, and believes that it is better to let the corpses turn into zombies. In this way, use them as training for Sanchi and the others. Meanwhile, Li Chuang is in the car and asks Chuya if they're already near Shou Yan's shelter. She tells him with a very affectionate attitude that they are about to arrive. In that, Kinji notices how her friend acts in front of Li Chuang, making her see that she always behaves like this with him, and hinting that she wants to compete to take away her lover. Once they arrive at the place, Kinji tells her friend to accompany her, but she doesn't seem to want to do it, to which she ends up forcing her, taking her out of the car, and ordering her to stop making excuses and complaints. Then Likoang warns the bandits he hired to be ready to loot. Once he gives them the signal, while the two girls walk talking, they notice that something has happened ahead. Suddenly they are impressed to see that the path to the entrance is full of corpses. This makes them think that other thugs have already come to loot Shou Yan's supplies, and with a disdainful attitude, they opine that most likely he is already dead too. However, while the two draw their conclusions behind, one of the bodies turning into a zombie observes them with threat. Once the two girls reach the door, they realize that it is made of a strong steel, which does not allow them to see absolutely anything. Suddenly Chan Chan, who is watching them from the viewpoint, demands that they tell her who they are and how they were able to find the place, and that they tell them that they are acquaintances of the protagonist. And Kinji mentions that she is his girlfriend. That's how Chan Chan immediately notifies Shou Yan of the message. But Kinji cannot help but feel annoyed upon learning how he has a new girlfriend, to which Chella, upon seeing her like that, tells her not to show any indication of being upset and focus on the mission. She also mentions that Chan Chan has a crossbow, so she asks if Li Chuang will be able to defeat them. But Kinji, still somewhat annoyed, tells her not to worry, since he brought a few firearms. So once they open the door, they will be able to eliminate the protagonist. In that, Shou Yan arrives, who asks them what they are doing in his house, and without thinking twice, activates his mind's eye to check the mood of the two. This allows him to realize that, although the two are pretending to be friendly, deep down they are furious and bring bad intentions. Shou Yan tells them that he doubts they are there to worry about it, and that Likoang scum must be hiding somewhere. So he orders them to tell him how many thugs he brought and what weapons they brought. Suddenly the two girls are impressed, because they had not foreseen that he knew about something like that. And immediately, a series of shots graze very close to them, being Shou Yan, who with a cold and calculating look, has opened fire on them. At the shock, Chuya tells her friend to stop provoking him, because he carries firearms. But Kinji, somewhat furious, tells her that she has nothing to fear, because she doesn't believe that the protagonist has the guts to eliminate her, and that he is heard with a confident smile. Clarifies to them that he has no intention of getting rid of them in such a quick way as that, since it seems to him that it is an easy death. Suddenly, the two turn around and realize that behind them, a horde of zombies have come to eat them. Quickly, Xiaoyan's face turns between a mixture of pleasure and revenge, telling them that he wants them to die slowly under the claws of the zombies. In the midst of panic, the two girls start to flee the place, running with all their strength to avoid being devoured. And in complete desperation, Kinji shouts to Li Chong to save her. But this cowardly fat man does nothing more than give the order to flee the place, leaving them completely to their fate. And suddenly Kinji, very desperate, decides to throw her purse towards her friend Chella, making her trip and fall to the ground. As expected, she ends up being devoured by the zombies after being betrayed. But while she is being eaten, she insults her friend, making it clear that she will not have a nice death once her time comes. And Kinji, after having eliminated her to save her skin, shouts in the distance that that's what she deserves. Suddenly a notification appears to the protagonist from the system, implying that what he did was also to complete a mission, thus earning 10 points and granting him another mission, which is to clear the area outside the shelter. In that, Chan Chan comments that those thugs who died earlier had transformed into zombies out of nowhere. So Shou Yan opines that this is really the beginning of the apocalypse, because apparently The air is already contaminated by alien infection. This causes people who are dead to be exposed to the outside air, quickly mutate into zombies even. Those who are injured or have weak bodies also have a high risk of mutation. After this, he asks Chan to call everyone because they're going to hold a small conference. And once everyone is gathered, he orders each one that for the next 2 days, stay sheltered inside the refuge. He also asks them to keep the windows closed and let their bodies gradually adapt to the infection because this will help them greatly reduce the risk of mutation. However, it seems that Chan, the companion who was badly injured and resting, is slowly succumbing to the virus. The city has become a complete chaos. That's what Shang says while observing from his window. After this, he tells his wife that he has to go to the warehouse tonight and bring the remaining supplies left. That is why he tells her and his son to stay at home and no matter what happens, never open the door to anyone unless it's him. But while he finishes these words, right at his door someone is knocking hard. So he tells his daughter and his wife to keep silent, grabbing a golf club and heading to open the door. This one, when hearing the voice, realizes that it is his partner Yantao. So he calms down for a moment. But suddenly, when opening the Yantao, gives him a strong kick in the stomach. That knocks him to the ground. And immediately his men proceed to arrest him. He, visibly desperate, asks him to order his men to release him and asks him what he is plotting, since he has treated him very well. But Yantao tells him that no, it doesn't seem like he has treated him well, since in his eyes, he surely only sees him as just another lackey. He also emphasizes that he has a little conscience, since if it wasn't for him, he would never have been able to save to buy that house he has. Yantao complains that he made little money from the houses, while Shang made a lot with the sale of other properties. So after so much chatter, he demands Shang with a threatening tone to give him the keys to the deposit, as well as the address of the place. But he does not respond as a sign that he is resisting. So Yantao, in a cruel way, goes to his wife and holds her tightly by the hair, hurting her, and that his son gets angry and tells him to let her go, biting Yantao's arm. But he, in a ruthless act, slaps him that sends the child to the floor. And that saying tells him that if he has so much guts, come towards him, but leave his wife and son alone. To which Yantao comments that there is no problem, because as soon as he decides to cooperate, both his wife and son will be safe. With nothing else to do, Zhang takes him and his men to the supply depot. But Yantao, somewhat doubtful, asks him if these are the only supply boxes left. In that, Shang replies that he was the one who found those big customers before, and that's why almost all the supplies are already sold, including the food that is already about to expire is almost over. This makes Yantao think of Shoyin, because he was responsible for having bought many boxes before. So he comes up with the idea that if they go and loot from the supplies he has stored in his factory, then they would have reserves for life. However, Shang warns him that he better stay away from it, because the other day when he was making some orders, he noticed that he was carrying a weapon. So in some way, he has managed to break through during all the chaos in the city, and already has a lot of advantage. But Yantao tells him that this is not a problem, since he will be the one who has to deal with him. At this, Shank is intrigued and asks him what he means, to which Yantao orders him that he will be the one to take care of stealing Xiaoyan's supplies, because only then he will be able to have his wife and son safe again, blatantly blackmailing him, changing the scene. The protagonist and the other boys are in the medical room, seeing the serious condition in which Sean is, who is already mutated almost into a zombie, and is roaring like crazy. At the shock, Jimin, without any remorse, tells the protagonist to eliminate him. But this one stares at him somewhat strangely and silently, and that Sanchi, who is affected, asks him what he is saying. But Jimin remains attached to the idea that he is practically dead, and if he doesn't take care of eliminating him now, he could somehow get away and put everyone's lives at risk. In that, Xiaoyan Tian reproaches him that he is a friend, almost like his brother, and that they can't just give up and let him die without even trying something. However, the protagonist intervenes, saying that Jimin is right, because once he becomes a zombie, practically, there is no possibility that he can recover. Immediately afterwards, he takes out a knife from his pocket and gives it to Jimin, telling him to use it. He is somewhat nervous and comments why he is giving it to him, but the protagonist tells him simply to use it to eliminate his friend Sean, claiming that he always wanted a weapon. So now that he has it, he must use it to end the misery and suffering of his partner. However, in the midst of this, Sanchi approaches and tells Shou Yin that it is better to give him the weapon because he is going to take care of doing it. Given the request that Sanchi is making, the protagonist comments if he is sure he can do this and asks him what would happen if he was lying, since once he kills him, it would then turn him into a murderer. However, Sanchi tells him that it doesn't matter because he fully trusts the protagonist, to which Xiaoyan, with a smile on his face, tells him to then go and do it. That's how Sanchi approaches something, nervous about having to do something like this. But he has enough guts, and without thinking much, decides to stab the knife and end it all at once. However, the protagonist grabs his arm just before he eliminates him, telling him that for this occasion, they leave the place, since his case is special, and he still has something to do with him. All this while having a system notification that a rare mutation variant has been discovered. Once all the boys leave the room, the protagonist is left looking at Sean, already mutated into a zombie, and tells him that he has an important task for him. Changing the scene, Sean is driving frantically until reaching the protagonist's shelter, and that a zombie approaches him to attack him, and with great speed manages to bite him on his left arm. In the midst of desperation, he pushes him and runs towards his car to grab the golf club and eliminate him, giving him several blows until leaving him crushed. Then he says that this place is a complete chaos and that he should not be careless, while he continues to sneak through the area. On the other hand, the protagonist is with his group, leaving the fortress armed and equipped. In that Chan comments to him that, with all the things she has on and the equipment on her body, she feels somewhat uncomfortable and slow. But he emphasizes that the zombies have no kind of rationality, and that their energy and explosive force is more powerful than that of a regular human, which makes them quite dangerous. Also, given the combat skills she has now, he tells her that the best thing would be that before she gets hurt, she better use equipment that protects her body, since once she gains much more combat experience, she can take it off to feel lighter. After this, he warns everyone to get ready, because already they are within the perception range of the zombies, and that a zombie already notices their presence and approaches to attack them. Suddenly, Shou Yin tells everyone to remember what he taught them and watch each other's backs, as well as keep their distance. All this while dodging the zombie, to use it as an example and learn. He mentions that the moment when a zombie's attack is successfully dodged, that is the perfect moment to be able to attack. So precisely and quickly they must aim, either at the temple or the back of their neck. In that, Shao Kai proceeds to attack the zombie, but he ends up hitting it in the central part of its skull, making it rumble throughout his arm and causing him pain. The protagonist tells everyone that the skull is the hardest and most solid part of the head, in addition to not receiving as much damage, because it will only cause the hands to become numb, pointing out that what Shao Kai just did is the perfect example of what not to do. Then the zombie forcefully lunges towards, but Shao Kai manages to block it satisfactorily with the machete, while asking for help for someone to save him. However, the protagonist, who is being a teacher, praises Shao Kai's good defense and reaction, and immediately afterwards, he asks Sanchi to act and save his comrade. This one, with great speed, positions himself in the back of the zombie, and with his bat, he gives him a strong blow to the neck, which leaves him on the floor. And that's how everyone takes advantage to attack him in unison. After having defeated him satisfactorily, Sanchi turns towards Xiaoyan to ask him how they did this time. But he quickly realizes that there is a zombie behind, about to attack him. At that moment, Xiaoyan, without flinching at all, holds him easily by the face, while continuing to give lessons to his companions, that they do not forget what he told them about never. But for nothing in the world can they let their guard down when it comes to observing the surroundings. This great skill and experience of our protagonist leaves the whole group impressed by how skilled and confident he is in this type of situations. On the other hand, Shang is still wandering around the area and seeing the large number of zombies there. He wonders if Xiaoyan is still alive. Suddenly, he hears the sound of the voices of all the boys in the distance and realizes that it is Xiaoyan's voice. He quickly approaches and hides next to the van, with curiosity, noticing that the whole group is there hunting zombies. But he does not realize that under the vehicle, Chulla's mutated body is crawling towards him and quickly grabs his leg, making him fall to the floor. This makes him panic, seeing how he is about to be devoured. Just when the zombie was about to attack Shang, the protagonist appeared out of nowhere and ended up eliminating him with his rifle. After saving him, he looked at him seriously and asked him what he was doing here, to which Shang, still surprised to be alive, could hardly believe it. However, the attention of the protagonist soon turned towards Shang's left arm, where he noticed a bite mark. In that, Shoyin did not hesitate to raise his weapon, aiming firmly. But Shang, visibly nervous, asked him not to do it, because he had something important to confess. Shang admitted that he was infected, and that he did not have much time left before turning into a mutant. However, before succumbing to his destiny, he revealed that Yantao, whom he called a despicable human being, had kidnapped his wife and son and used them as hostages, blackmailing him to sabotage Xiaoyan and seize his resources. With a broken voice, Shang confessed that although he was not a noble man, he did not believe he had done anything unforgivable, and his family instead were innocent, and he knew that Yantao's henchmen would not spare their lives. So very desperate, he begged Shou Yin to take care of them, as payment for the help he had given him in the past. Suddenly Shou Yin silently reflected, because although Shang had also sought his own benefit, he could not deny that at the time he had been a great help. Then he looked around, evaluating the fortress that still had capacity for more people, although it was unbalanced with more men than women. Suddenly a message from the system appeared in front of him with a new mission, which was to rescue Shang's wife and son. And followed by that, another task was also activated, which was to clear the zombies that roamed the area. After reading the messages, Shou Yin addressed Shang, assuring him that he would take care of his family. Upon hearing this, he knelt before him, very grateful, and with tears in his eyes. He told him that he could never repay him in this life, but in the next he would be his very loyal servant. Then, in a serious tone, he asked him to end his life before he transformed. But Shou Yin, somewhat bewildered, looked at him silently, and instead of fulfilling the request, gave an order to Chan Chan to bring a bicycle from the warehouse. With this, he told Shang to go far away, to a desolate place where he would not put anyone at risk. At this, a stunned Shang asked why he was doing this, but Shou Yin was firm and indicated that he had no time for explanations, as he simply had to do it with some resignation. Zhang obeyed and got on the bicycle and left, riding away while tears continued to flow as he thought of his wife and son. Meanwhile, Xiaoyan began to gather the corpses of the zombies, sprinkling them with gasoline, then lit a lighter and set them on fire, fulfilling one of the system's tasks. Afterwards, he addressed the group, declaring that some were already capable of defeating a zombie with melee weapons without taking damage, but he warned that they were not yet ready to face hordes. After this brief talk, he ordered the group to follow him before departing. Shou Yin entrusted the grandfather with the key to the weapons warehouse, as he planned to head to the cities tonight, and the safety of the shelter would be in his hands. Worried, the grandfather asked if he would really go alone, knowing that the city was in chaos. But suddenly, Sanchi appeared, with the rest of the group offering to accompany him. But Shou Yin told them it was not necessary, as he didn't want to endanger their lives. And besides, they would be nothing but a burden. Soon, Shou Yin got into his vehicle equipped with several weapons. While reviewing the system store, he looked somewhat desperate, noting how slow the store update was, and although the mission seemed difficult, he decided to refresh the catalog. At that, 3 new items appeared, but the cost of updating the store was increasing. However, the objects were worth it, so without hesitation, he exchanged his points for a box containing a serum, capable of improving physical strength, and without much thought, he injected it and felt how his body began to strengthen. Meanwhile, in Shang's house, his wife and children were still kidnapped. She tried to reassure her son, promising him that his father would rescue them soon. However, her hopes faded when the door was kicked open. At that, Yantao and his henchmen entered, with perverse looks and bad intentions, claiming they wanted to have some fun. However, another of Yantao's henchmen arrives in the room, who asks them why they are making so much noise. One of them tells him to come and join the party, but he tells them that the job has not yet been finished, and they're already thinking of doing that kind of mischief, so he asks them to let her go. He argues that if they mess with his wife and son, now she could become depressed and try to end her life. This way would make her husband go crazy against them, and no one would win in this situation. So after they get rid of her husband, they will be able to do whatever they want to his wife, so much that she will never have a day of rest. Once said this, Yantao leaves the place with his henchmen, with a face full of malice and shamelessness, leaving San's wife very shocked. Changing scene, the protagonist is driving with total calm, thinking that the 13 points that he has increased in his physical strength are equivalent to double what a normal person has, including his reaction and control have improved significantly, and this feeling makes him feel very cool. After this, he gets out of the car opining that the city is ahead, and mentions that if he keeps driving it will be very obvious, for which he will choose to walk. However, beside him, he hears the roar of zombies approaching him, but he, with an inhuman ability, dispatches them both with a single movement, then invokes his machete and proceeds to swing at them, chopping them into pieces in a flash. After this, he opines that whether it is strength or reaction speed, these improvements surpass any current zombie. Practically, it's having the physique twice that of a normal person. In addition, he is pleased that his sense of perception has also improved significantly. This makes him realize that approximately 800 meters away, he hears the voices of civilians. And suddenly in that, a system message tells him that there is a new task, which he must fulfill. Changing scene, in the interior of the city, there are a group of humans who are inside a store, resisting the horde of zombies. At that, a boy asks his dad if they're going to die here, but he tells him to calm down because they will find a way to get out alive and reunite with their mom. However, this makes his son start to cry, and then one of the policemen tells the father, whose name is Song, that he is very bad at trying to comfort people, as he only ruins it. But Zone comments that if he was good with communications, then he would have already been promoted to manager a long time ago. However, the situation becomes more and more chaotic as zombies try to enter the place, when suddenly a loud sound, almost like a roar, is heard at that instant. And suddenly the zombie's head is exploded in front of all the refugees. In that, the policeman orders the two to go and remove the barricade to check the entrance. And this is how the 4 survivors go out armed, wondering who might have been the person who did this. But the boy tells them that definitively, the cause of all this was a mutant, to which his dad, somewhat intrigued, asks him what a mutant is. His son replies that it is a version more powerful and skilled than common zombies, because that's how they describe them in comics, novels, and video games. Before this, his father tells him to stop reading that kind of stuff, because it doesn't impress him that he is always the worst in his class. However, the policeman calls his attention, telling him not to be so reckless at a time like this, and mentions to them to concentrate on observing their surroundings carefully so they are not ambushed by the mutant. While the policeman gives instructions to everyone, they hide in a corridor cautiously. On the other hand, the protagonist is reviewing the system message, which has entrusted him with the task of rescuing some people in order to earn points. Meanwhile, the group of survivors observe Shou Yin, and the boy does not hesitate to tell them that person is a mutant. Definitely. But the policeman, when looking at him, doesn't seem to believe he is a mutant, but rather an ordinary survivor. The protagonist, who has already noticed everyone's presence, proceeds to turn around, and with a smile on his face, tells the boy that he has a great imagination for having called him a mutant. However, he comments that it is still early for the real mutant zombies to have emerged yet. Suddenly, the policeman, seeing his attitude, tells him that he is definitely a survivor, and advises him not to go wandering the streets alone, as it is very dangerous, and suggests that he better join them in order to survive. In that, Shou Yin asks if they're the only ones around the place. But the policeman tells him that they are looking for supplies, and that there are still many civilian survivors in the city, specifically in the Rongxin Garden. Upon hearing this, the protagonist tells him that this place reminds him that nearby there is a mansion, and it shouldn't be too far from there. To which the policeman affirms that indeed, it is not so far, as it is only across the street. At that, the boy's father, friendly, tells the protagonist to come with them, because if there are more, then they can be stronger. Besides, the policeman, whose name is Captain Lee, will be able to protect them from the zombies. To which Shou Yin upon hearing this, smiles and laughing thanks them honestly for their treatment. In that zone, asks the protagonist who he plans to meet at that mansion, since whether it is a family member or a girlfriend, the apocalyptic situation reduces the probabilities that they are alive, for which he tells him to be mentally prepared for that. And that Captain Lee tells him he is right, because even if they were not eaten by the mutants, surely they have already been harmed by those animals. Shoyin, upon hearing this, asks what he means by the animals, which he tells him that it is a gang of thugs who gather in the Bijui Mountain. They are responsible for eliminating the survivors without any remorse to ensure their own survival. In fact, Captain Lee claimed that they have already met them and have lost many of their own. Then he tells him that there is no need to talk about that anymore and tells the protagonist to keep his guard always high. However, while saying this, a zombie approaches him from behind to attack him. He quickly turns around and with a shot to the head, dispatches the zombie. However, it is already too late, as the sound of the shot will attract many other zombies in the area. This makes Captain Lee quite nervous and wondering what he will do now, but quickly spots a bus in the distance, with which he gives the order to everyone to run and hide there. While Shoyin runs in his mind, he opines that fleeing in this way can cause even more zombies to approach. But that bus is also a very good option, perfect for defense, for which he opines that the decision the policeman made was not so bad. After all, after everyone enters, the protagonist is the last to arrive. And then Captain Lee tells everyone to be careful and check each of the seats in case there is a mutant hiding inside. At that, the boy alerts everyone that the zombies have not given up and they are all gathering outside the bus. The zombies are more and more and are eager to enter. However, Captain Lee is at his limit, as he can barely hold them at the entrance. At that, Shoyin approaches and extending his hand, sends all the zombies at the entrance flying away. This impresses the policeman, who asks himself, how is it possible that he has a strength of that magnitude? But Shoyin tells him not to worry, because he will guard the door so it doesn't open, for which he can go with the others and move the zombies away from the windows. Meanwhile, on the other side, Sun has broken the bus window to be able to dispatch the zombies that are becoming more and more. Upon arriving, Captain Lee cannot help but think that there are many mutants and does not believe he has enough bullets in his pistol to take care of them all. At that, the protagonist appears to offer him his crossbow, telling him to use it instead. This leaves Captain Lee confused, who wonders where he got a weapon like this. But he tells him that he picked it up around there. And finally, all the zombies in the area are finished dispatching, clearing the entire area. At that, Sun can't help but feel euphoric, saying that they have escaped death twice, and that it can't just be mere luck, claiming that surely they're the chosen ones of the apocalypse. But Xiaoyan advises them to always stay alert and not make mistakes like those again. On the other hand, in the protagonist's shelter, Jimin has offered himself to stand guard during that night. But at that, Xiao Kai, with a joking attitude, asks why he is so eager to stand guard today. But he gets mysteriously upset with him and speaks harshly, to which Xiao Kai tells him to calm down, because he doesn't have to be so defensive. Therefore, the grandfather, upon hearing this, tells everyone that then Jimin will be the one to do the guard duty tonight, and everyone should go to their rooms to rest. After a while, Jimin is sitting, doing his guard duty without any apparent problem. But soon he opines to himself that it is already late and that surely everyone should be asleep by now. That's how he gets to work and decides to do what he has in mind before the protagonist returns. So quickly, he enters the grandfather's room to try to steal the key. Stealthily, as he gets closer, little by little he extends his hand to grab the key, but ends up waking the grandfather in the act, to which he asks him what he is doing. At this, Jimin proceeds hastily to punch him in the head to try to knock him out, but the grandfather reproaches him and orders him to give the keys back. These screams echo throughout the hallway and end up waking everyone else in that. Chan asks her grandfather what has happened, and he replies that the keys to the weapons warehouse have been stolen, for which he orders everyone to hurry to stop him. While Jimin is running, he begins to obstruct the pursuit by throwing many things on the floor. After this, he stops to look at the doctor's room, where his friend was, who turned into a zombie, for which with a malicious idea in mind decides to enter. That's how once inside he approaches to release him. However, He out of nowhere already seems to have broken from his bonds, to which Jimin opines that it is a perfect situation, because this way, he will save himself the work of having to untie him himself. While the group approaches the room, they notice that a zombie is wandering, with its back to them. And at that, Sanchi realizes that the zombie of his friend has been released, and that is something that can threaten everyone's lives. On the other hand, the grandfather opines that he would never have imagined that he was so evil, for which they have no choice but to do their best to put the zombie back in the doctor's room. Then he ordered all the boys to spread out and use the methods that the protagonist taught them to defend themselves. Once they are positioned, they all pounce on the zombie, and Sanchi immediately grabs him by the neck to keep him subdued, while the others hold him by the arms. And once they have him under control, they proceed to put him back in the medical room quickly and finally close the door. At this, everyone wonders if it was quite easy than they imagined. When subduing him, however, they have already lost a lot of time, and the evil Jimin surely has already taken all the weapons from the warehouse. But at that he appears precisely and tells them that he could not find all the weapons since they were hidden by Shou Yin. But at least he managed to get one that was there. That's how, pointing towards his former allies, Jimin threatens them to enter the medical room. But Sanchi, with a look of disappointment, told him to stop what he was doing, since the protagonist has been the one who saved him. However, Jimin reproaches him that a great favor can turn into everyone's doom, claiming that the protagonist has gotten too big for his boots, and now everyone has become his slaves for life. Faced with these harsh comments, the grandfather can't help but think that there are some people who are ungrateful by nature, and no matter how good you are to them. However, Jimin aggressively tells them to shut up once and for all, and to obey his orders. Changing scene, the protagonist meets the other group, and Captain Lee is giving him directions on how to get to the mansion, and mentions that the terrain of that place is quite complicated, which can be perfect for zombies to hide, and mentions that once he completes his mission, he must meet them at the main entrance, which the protagonist, upon hearing this, raises his thumb as a sign of understanding and quickly gets up from them. At that, Zone asks Captain Lee if they should not stop him, since it was he who saved him a while ago. However, he tells him that no matter how much they have told him, not to go alone, since Shou Yin remains stubborn with wanting to go. On the other hand, the cynical Yan Tao is in the building, still waiting for news. But little by little, he begins to reach the conclusion that surely Shang is not even alive. At that, one of his henchmen tells him that he is tired of waiting and wants to do what he wants, for which they will tie up his wife so that she does not try to end her life, and they will do whatever they want. Faced with this, one of the other henchmen comments that it is fine, but warns them to be careful. However, he turns his gaze towards the window and sees that at the entrance, all the zombies that were down have been annihilated, leaving him somewhat uneasy. That's how that henchman opens the door to investigate, questioning if it is a rescue. But suddenly a terror invades him, and a sharp and fast blade cuts his neck before he can react, being eliminated in a matter of seconds. At the same time, the men approach Shang's wife and son, to which the mother, full of despair, orders them to stay away. But two men return her gaze, with sinister smiles that chill her blood. And soon one of them tells her to stop pretending, to which the woman, with anguish, screams, asking what they are doing, and demanding that they leave her son alone, while he is torn from her side, which intensifies her horror. But at that despicable guy slaps her, causing the boy to fall to the ground. However, despite the palpable fear, he kneels and promises to fight bravely for his mother. But suddenly he is thrown through the door. With unforeseen brutality and in a desperate act, the boy confronts the men, begging them to release his mother, and reminding them that his father will not forgive them for this. And right at that moment, a slashed henchman is thrown into the room, causing the boy to scream in terror. Continually frightened, he looks towards the shadow that appears in the door. And finally, our protagonist introduces himself and asks the boy if Shang is his father, to which the boy tremblingly murmurs an answer, visibly shocked. Meanwhile, the mother, consumed by despair, shrinks into a corner, and suddenly Yan Tao slaps her and, full of rage, shouts at her if she is afraid that her son will hear it, threatening her that if she cooperates, the consequences will be very serious. In that, One of the accomplices points out that since there is no response, he will take the lead, and gently caresses the woman's head, who cries inconsolably. But suddenly, at that moment, the bedroom door bursts open, and a henchman mentions to the boy that he has guts to do that, but in an unexpected turn, his neck is cut down in a flash. In that, Yan Tao, realizing the chaos, turns towards the door and asks, why haven't they gotten rid of the boy yet? When suddenly, one of his accomplices falls dead at his feet. Upon seeing this, Yan Tao gets uneasy wondering what is happening, but in the blink of an eye, Shou Yin grabs his head and throws him backwards, making him crash against the wall, which impacts very strongly, making him spit blood. Immediately, one of the accomplices, very confused, asks him who he is, but the protagonist responds with an accurate kick. That leaves the man trembling. Meanwhile, in the fortress, Jimin holds his pistol, warning that he will shoot if they do not leave his sight, and the old man orders the others to listen and head to the indicated room, assuring that the villain has a weapon and that they should obey him, while they elaborate a plan. And in that, Jimin, with an evil smile, asks if perhaps they think they can do anything against him, and warns that if he does not show cruelty right now, he will never establish his control. That's how, smiling, he mentions that the old man will be the first to fall, which causes Chan, and Sanchi to scream in dismay, demanding him to stop. However, at that moment, Jimin observes the door of the infirmary, wondering what noise was that. Surprised by this, he asks himself about what is happening and how the door of the infirmary was unlocked. And suddenly in that, Chan turned into a zombie appears in front of everyone. Immediately, everyone wonders if perhaps it was Chan who unlocked the door, although they consider it impossible, since he is a zombie and would not use a key. While Jimin, incredulous, observes Chan and amazed asks what has happened, to which this very furious approaches Jimin, letting saliva fall from his mouth, as if he had something pending against him. But immediately Jimin points the gun at him, ensuring that he cannot allow a zombie, who knows how to use a key to open the door, to continue alive. That's how, without hesitation, he shoots everything against the zombie. But to his surprise, the weapon does not work. At that moment, Jimin feels distressed and shouts that the weapon is blocked, and Chan then takes advantage of this to pounce, while Jimin, full of panic, asks how it is possible that this is happening. And that's how that zombie begins to devour him little by little, and then drags him into one of the rooms. As the tension grows, the group begins to wonder what is happening, and observe with concern how Chan now seems to be a little calmer. Furthermore, everyone contemplates Chan with disbelief and astonishment, and for his part, the old man, upon seeing the torrent of blood, covers his mouth in a gesture of horror. Subsequently, the zombie heads to the door with the keys in his hand, and suddenly throws the keys towards the group, and these fall in front of them, surprisingly. Then the zombie returns to the infirmary, as if nothing had happened. Faced with this situation, everyone looked at each other in astonishment, because they were still unable to assimilate what was happening, since zombies were supposed to attack people by instinct. But this was not the case with Good Chan. Returning with our protagonist, he has finally managed to contain all the bandits, and in that, with a firm voice, he calls the boy to come closer, which he's scared and confused, observes Holland, and asks what he wants. Meanwhile, the boy's mother, terrified, hugs him tightly and questions Holland what he intends to ask her son. However, the protagonist ignores the woman and calls the boy again, who, despite the fear, separates from his mother and tells her that everything will be fine. Then, Shou Yin hands him a knife and instructs him to take it. Then, with a cold look, he goes to the men who were tied up and orders the boy to eliminate them. Upon hearing this, immediately the men plead for mercy, while the mother, completely dismayed, shouts that he is just a boy. But despite their pleas, Shou Yin addresses the boy seriously, affirming that from that moment the rules change, and he explains that those men are guilty of the death of his father. Faced with this revelation, the boy observes the men with fear in his eyes, and finally, with a fixed and terrified gaze, he screams and lashes out at them. After finishing off the men, Mutant, exhausted, sighs relieved, realizing that everything is over, and in that instant the mother shouts his name. Horrified by the scene, shortly after, Mutant asks Xiaoyan if his words are true, if they really ended the life of his father. To which our protagonist tells him that indeed it is so. Upon hearing this, the mother runs over, hugging her son and begging Shoyin to take him to a safe place, and assures him that she will do anything in return for that. However, the boy tells her that he will not leave, and that he wishes to remain by his side to protect her. And in response, Xiaoyan affirms that both will go with him, and assures him that everything will be fine, since he promised Shang that he would keep them safe. Now being outside the building, the three walk in the darkness of the apocalyptic night, and at one point, Yuten stumbles upon a pile of bodies, both zombies and people lying on the ground, and surprised, he asks himself what kind of being can take down so many zombies, to which Shou Yin firmly replies that it was him. But suddenly, in that, he raises his hand and asks them to stop for a moment. He looks to one side and asks the woman if she has any idea where Building 8 is located of the Rongxiang Garden, to which she, surprised, tells him that it should be in the direction she is looking, and asks what is the reason. Meanwhile, in Building 8, a group of armed men have just arrived at the place, and the leader proclaims that they will redistribute the supplies fairly, and orders that all women under 40 years of age accompany them. Meanwhile, inside the building, the group advances with fear, led by Captain Lee and Sun, who are at the front. But in that, a member of the group raises the question of what to do, and suggests that the best is to surrender. However, Captain Lee replies that those men do not keep their promises, and that in the end no one but the women will get out alive. But suddenly, the leader of the thugs warns them that they have 10 minutes, and if they do not cooperate, he will not leave anyone alive. In that, a woman proposes that perhaps they should go out and apologize, but the other opposes, affirming that she does not want to become their toy. However, Captain Lee assures them that they will not have problems if they remain firm, and asks them to watch the hallway, since that way they could not do anything to them. Meanwhile, outside the building, one of the men mentions that although they have good weapons, their leader also has a real pistol, and complains that if they remain hidden, they will not be able to enter by force. However, the leader mentions that that will not be necessary, and orders to shut off the water supply to the apartments on the first floor, wanting to see how long they can resist. Meanwhile, Shou Yin, accompanied by the woman and her young son, arrive in front of the building, and in that Yuten asks him if those are bandits, to which he without doubt responds that yes, and pointing, he mentions that they are like the ones who scare his mother in it. At the same time, Captain Lee tells them to secure the stairs, and not be exposed, promising that he will check the situation below, to which the people, upon seeing his courage, ask him to be very careful. That's how Captain Lee looks out the window, and counts 7 fully armed people, of which 3 carry extremely dangerous equipment. But suddenly, at that he gets scared when he sees something from his position, and inside the building, the others also look very confused by the noise they just heard. Meanwhile, outside, the leader of the gang asks what the hell is going on, when suddenly, one of his men is attacked suddenly, and immediately upon realizing this, he shouts asking who is there. In that, Captain Lee, soaked in sweat, observes, terrified, and stammers upon recognizing someone, realizing that it was none other than our protagonist, who approaches the building with great determination. And without thinking twice, Shou Yin opens fire against the bandits, and one of them screams in pain as he falls, with a shot that eliminates him instantly. And at the same time, another thug observes how his partner collapses next to him. Before this, 2 men quickly shoot at our protagonist, but Shou Yin very easily dodges all these attacks, mocking their lack of skill, and suddenly he appears behind the leader, without losing sight of him for a second, to which this bandit, very nervous, asks where that madman came from. But without hesitation, Shou Yin begins to open fire against him, who was covering himself behind a small closet, and in that, seeing that they were not doing anything, he asked one of his men what they were doing, while he was keeping him busy, and shouts at him to shoot, which upon hearing this, the other bandit, cursing, aims at Shou Yin. But before he can execute his attack, the protagonist quickly turns and shoots him, causing the bandit to scream in pain after receiving 2 hits. In that, the leader, seeing that he was not carrying out any more attacks, laughs at Xiaoyan, asking if he has run out of bullets, and without hesitation, he comes out of his hiding place, warning him to prepare to die. However, he remained very calm at all times, when suddenly that bandit opens fire against him. But despite the distance, Xiaoyan manages to dodge the shot very easily, and then grabs the leader's arm and twists it, to then finish him off in just a few moments. Then he observes how the chief's body falls to the ground, and then Xiaoyan approaches the fallen bandit and kneels to check his pulse. After this, our protagonist enters the building, and 3 armed men with scythes and axes wait for him at the entrance. But Xiaoyan simply observes them seriously, when suddenly the 3 attack him at the same time. However, he dodges the attacks, and in the blink of an eye, finishes them all off. After that, our protagonist orders everyone to go out, and as soon as they do, Son comments that he has just performed an impressive feat, and at the same time, several peeked out from their hiding places to find out what was happening. But suddenly a notification arrives for Xiaoyan, informing him that he had a new mission, which was about recruiting survivors from the Rongxiang Garden, with a reward of 25 points. After reading this mission, our protagonist asks who those people are, to which Captain Li clarifies that they are the beasts of the Bichuan villages. Intrigued by this information, Xiaoyan asks about this village, which Captain Li replies that it is located south of the city, and at that instant 2 friends come running, and Captain Li tells them to hurry to inform the protagonist about Bichuan since they came from that area. That's how these 2 explain to Xiaoyan that this gang is well armed, and they hide in the Bichuan villages, having captured almost all the survivors from the south. Reflecting on what he had heard, Xiaoyan wonders if that is the place where they had settled Li Chuang and Qinji in his previous life, and begins to doubt if it could really be there. Next, he asks if they're claiming that Bichuan is the only refuge left in the south, to which one of the men in yellow tells him yes, explaining that it wasn't like that before. However, due to their weapons, the smaller settlements could not defend themselves, and adds that those bandits eradicate half of the population in the areas they control, and then kidnap young and beautiful women, as well as those who are willing to collaborate. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyan concludes that they must indeed be them, to which Captain Li, surprised, asks him what that means. Then, the protagonist asks him to check the 3 men, to check if they have extra magazines, since these will serve him later, to which the captain mentions that there are likely to be more. Then our protagonist hands him his weapon, and asks him to keep that rifle too, leaving 5 magazines for him. At this unexpected surprise, Captain Li, very astonished, observes the rifle and the magazines, and at that moment, Xiaoyan affirms that the bandits of the Bichuan Mountain will not surrender very easily. But he mentions that even with these few weapons, they'll be able to take care of 12 people. Therefore, he orders them to stay here for a few days, while he returns to his shelter, to reorganize and return, to confront all those bandits. However, one of the men in yellow, very astonished, asks if he is serious, pointing out that Xiaoyan has no chance against them, since they are many. And likewise, the captain, Li, warns him that it is not worth taking that risk, and suggests that they should look for another place. He also points out that that site is several kilometers away, and they will not be able to check the whole city. However, the protagonist assures him not to worry, since this is a personal matter between him and those bandits. And to finish, he mentions that in a few days, he will return with a larger vehicle to take everyone to the east of the city. Upon hearing this, Captain Li, surprised, asks what he means by the other side of the city, to which Xiaoyan confirms that it is near the old DT building of the city, where he has established a fortress and needs help. Finally, Captain Li says that now he understands, and our protagonist says goodbye, asking them to be careful and stay alert. Meanwhile, outside the building, the zombies lie lifeless, on the ground and elsewhere, on the roof of a building near Bichuan. A guard carefully observes what is happening. Later, the bodies of 3 zombies can be seen, hanging at the entrance of Bichuan, and inside a building, 4 men are sitting around a table, heatedly discussing a matter. At that moment, an elegant man, dressed in white and with glasses, named Wencheng, asks if they have already gotten the supplies from the entertainment center, to which Li Chuang replies that he has sent some of his team and that they should be back soon. And in that, one of the men mentions that there are very powerful people living in the Jinju mansion, for which they could not only focus on the supplies in the entertainment city. Li Chong in turn tells this guy named Kai Gang that he has already indicated to his men to bring any survivors. However, when Wencheng reproaches him for not having fulfilled any of the tasks he assigned him, Li Chuang assures that there is no reason to worry and promises that this time everything will go as planned. That is how, after this conversation outside the building, Li Chuang approaches one of his men, visibly fatigued, to which this man asks him if everything is okay. But Li Chuang, without hesitation, asks about the whereabouts of the 7 men he sent, which this guy, very nervous, explains that an hour ago he sent someone to investigate and that there is very bad news. Upon hearing this, Li Chuang, very angry, asks if they had all been eliminated and questions how it was possible that only 3 weapons finished them off, if in reality, the people who were in the Rongxian building were ordinary civilians. And very furious, orders to notify Taisu to gather all those who are more skilled, since this time he will not allow the situation to get out of control. Meanwhile, Xiaoyan's car arrives at the fortress, and the first to give the news of his return is none other than Chan Chan, who comes out to see him along with everyone. The others, at the same time that the protagonist system notifies him that he has successfully completed the mission of rescuing the woman and the child, receiving 25 points as a reward. The whole group welcomes him with great joy, while he only appreciates how the traitor is the only one missing, which attracts Chan Chan's attention a lot, since apparently the protagonist knew of his intentions from the beginning, without answering the questions that surely everyone has about this. Shou Yin asks Sanchi to take the woman and the child to one of the remaining rooms, so that later, while they settle in, the others gather in the infirmary to carry out their experiment. Minutes later, everyone gathers at the doors of the infirmary, where old Chembo asks Shou Yin if he always knew that Jimin was planning something bad. The protagonist assures that he was not sure who it could be, but he did suspect that one of Sanchi's friends could be a traitor. And more than that, there was also a beast. The protagonist had prepared rubber bullets for when they used the weapons, which made them harmless in case something like Jimin's was to happen. However, what is even stranger is the zombie in the infirmary, since he had shown great intelligence and the ability to control himself. Gon, another of Sanchi's friends, was not lucky enough not to be bitten, but the protagonist was able to notice that he was not a common zombie, but a strange variety of the infected. That's why when he stayed with him in the infirmary, he asked if he could understand him, ordering him to blink 3 times to prove it. Since the answer was affirmative, he continued with a few more questions to confirm how conscious Gon he was. That way he was able to know that it was a variant. Shou Yin explains that after people were infected and affected by the source of the disease, there began to be cases of unique individuals among the zombies, becoming variants of the species, becoming stronger and smarter, but above all more dangerous, having a much greater potential than that of any normal zombie. Thanks to this, they can retain some of their memories from their previous life before becoming infected. Fortunately, Gon is a rare specimen among the rare. And with that said, the protagonist proceeds to open the door so that everyone can see him for themselves, finding the zombie, finishing off the traitor. Surprisingly, and despite the unfriendly face, Gon greets them friendly with a smile, leaving everyone uncomfortable and amazed. The protagonist goes on to order him to stop playing around and simply take care of taking out the trash, to which Gon begins to drag Jimin out of the infirmary. While everyone watches him, Sanchi feels doubts and comes closer to ask if he can really still remember his life, past, and their friendship. The zombie stops for a second to look at him angrily, making the tension of the place unbearable, to then throw a slap towards Sanchi, who barely dodges it. Far from being an attack, this was just a bad joke from Gon, which confirms for Sanchi that he does remember their friendship, because even being a zombie, he still has a couple of very annoying hands. It seems some things never change. Shortly after everyone discovered Gon's intelligence, the protagonist retires to his room to rest, moment in which he receives a notification from the system that he has achieved a hidden achievement for having obtained an infected partner, giving him 10 points of reward. Not even Shou Yin himself expected this to play in his favor, so he decides to open the store to spend his points, finding the usual rewards, except for a level 2 box, which is the first one he sees since he got the system. The only problem is that opening it costs 50 points, and he doesn't have that amount yet. So he decides to open the other two, to at least free up space. In doing so, he sees that one of the boxes allows him to block and resist the infection coming from other sources outside of the zombies, but he cannot reverse it once it has occurred. In other words, it only slows or blocks the effects of the infection, as long as it has not been completed. On the other hand, the second box contains several high-caliber souls, such as a sniper rifle and plenty of ammunition. The protagonist is excited to see such good rewards, wondering what a level 2 armament box will give him, or 3, and if he could cure people, if he uses the ability to block the infection. At that moment, another mission notice appears, to recruit survivors from Rongxiang. But although the protagonist is eager to open the level 2 box, he prefers to leave it for the next day. During the morning, Xiaoyan gathers everyone to start shooting practice, which they should carry out at least 1 hour a day. While everyone shoots, the protagonist asks Chembo that he and the others take care of emptying some of the rooms for the new survivors he will bring. In turn, he orders Gon to accompany him on the trip while wearing a mask to prevent others from knowing he's a zombie. When they leave, they arrive at the bus where Shoyin helped the group, but Gon is afraid to take off his mask by not being in the fortress, since he doesn't want to scare anyone. At the same time, Li Chuang is finishing gathering his men in Afeng to carry out an assault on Rongxiang, marching to the same group as the protagonist, but with other intentions. After having cleaned the bus of zombies, Shoyin drives fiercely through the streets, running over the infected to get to the Rongxiang garden. Here in one of the apartment buildings, Captain Li and the rest of his group are hiding. We're now resting a bit and eating, until they hear the sound of an engine and think it's Xiaoyan, who has returned to take them to his fortress. But before they rush out and get exposed, the captain asks everyone to remain silent while he looks out the window. To everyone's misfortune, it was not the protagonist, but Li Chuang's van and his men, who are finishing checking if their weapons work correctly while they keep searching until they find the right building. Li Chuang gives the order to advance, and Captain Li realizes their presence. But that only means they have serious problems. Right now, unlike the captain, they are not afraid of the bandits, and he prepares his weapon along with the others to teach Li Chuang's gang a lesson. Another of the group members supports him because now they have weapons. But Captain Li warns them not to underestimate the enemy, no matter how much they now have to defend themselves, because they outnumber them and also have better weapons. That's why the best thing they can do now is to take their positions and carry out the emergency plan they devised while Liz goes to the roof. Li Chuang and his gang finish carrying out the preparations to confront Li and the others. So they fire a round of bullets at the windows with the intention of intimidating and calling their attention. Then Li Chuang takes a megaphone and orders his men to be aware that they are not being shot at. Just before he can say something on the megaphone, a bullet pierces the head of one of his henchmen, and shortly after, another one does the same in someone else's leg. This makes the entire enemy team nervous, because now they have to face a rifle. The one responsible for all this is Li, who is watching everything from the roof, while Li Chong orders the others to cover themselves with something to avoid the shots. This was not in their plans, because according to what they had been told, the group only had a small weapon from Captain Li, and even if they managed to get more from the last confrontation they had, it would only be 4, and they shouldn't have a rifle like this. At that, one of Li Chuang's henchmen desperately asks him what they should do, to which the latter replies that they must retreat immediately. But the guy is so scared that he forgets to listen to his boss's orders, and that is why he ends up full of shots. Shortly after taking a couple of steps, knowing that danger is imminent, Li Chuang decides to bet everything on his next move, calling the attention of his entire group, so that together they attack the building at once. But while his men go to their end, he laughs because he got a chance to survive, fleeing to the van. While everyone falls from the rifle shots, one of his men, who is still left, tries to approach to ask to be taken as well. But Lilo kills him with a shot. Before he can get close, he tries, then eliminate the survivors from the van. But he can't hit an effective shot, so they escape unharmed. Meanwhile, on the road, the protagonist continues driving the bus, crossing paths with Li Chuang's van that passes in front of him at full speed. However, he does not give it importance, since the rescue mission and the points are much more important. So he heads to the Rongxiang building, where everyone is, finding the large number of bodies left by the rifle he gave to the captain. This helps him understand also that the car from before were the bandits of Lichuang, escaping after being repelled. But the important thing now is that Go doesn't stop looking at the bodies, as if he were a real zombie. Shou-Yin knows what's happening to him. He is hungry and thinks it is better to give the bodies to him than to leave them for the common zombies in the area. Gon smiles like a maniac and without thinking, pounces on the first body he is closest, while the protagonist orders him that when he finishes, wait for him under the building complex number 8, while Xiao-Yin heads towards the surviving group, aware how the meat makes him feel very different, and his eyes darken like those of a normal zombie. Meanwhile, the protagonist walks through the streets full of bodies, being a little surprised by the large number of enemies that Captain Lee eliminated. Captain Lee, while he goes directly to the door, the others manage to see him arrive, glad that this time it really is him, and he has returned to save them, receiving him as if he were a hero. Lee's group goes outside to greet him, to which Shou-Yin asks him if it was really him who took care of Li Chuang's gang. He confirms it, and it was all thanks to the rifle that the protagonist gave him. Since before retiring, he was known for being a master shooter, so he thanks Shou-Yin for giving it to him. At that moment, a roar sounds that ends the excitement of the moment, and everyone turns alert to see what it is. Gon slowly approaches, with the angry expression of a common zombie, which alerts Lee and the others, preparing to eliminate him with a shot. However, Xiao-Yin stops him and warns them not to get unnecessarily excited, since that zombie they are seeing comes with them. Captain Lee doesn't understand what he means, and even less when the zombie stops in front of a body. As soon as the protagonist gives him the green light to devour it, Gon reacts and pounces on it. This makes Lee think that the protagonist can communicate with zombies, but nothing could be further from the truth. Shou-Yin explains to them that Gon is not an ordinary zombie, but he does not give them the details, since he prefers to keep them when they are in a safer place. So he asks everyone to get on the bus, and so he can explain to them on the way, while he and the others get ready to leave. Gon continues eating nonstop, to which the protagonist warns him that he must hurry, because otherwise they will leave him behind. Moments later, we see Gon putting on his gas mask and approaching the back of the bus, where everyone else continues to look at him with some fear. Sun's son gets a little annoyed to see how even a zombie has a toy for himself, although he makes fun a little of how he looks like a little boy with a toy to chew on. Shou-Yin warns him not to say that in front of Gon, because even if he is friendly with people, that does not mean that he likes to be insulted. But the boy finds it a little cool to see him with a mask like that. Putting the jokes aside, Gon gets on the bus, and in doing so, the ladder wobbles to one side due to its weight, alerting everyone because he doesn't seem that big. Gon also surprises the protagonist by giving him a key and demonstrate that he already has the ability to speak, although he can only do it with much effort, and it is still almost unintelligible. Upon seeing this, Shou-Yin realizes that after eating 6 people, John has begun to evolve into a different kind of zombie, and for that same reason, understands that he must hurry to convert all the points he can into strength to become the most powerful if he were to need to face him. That's why he knows he must obtain a specific power. But for now, the priority is to leave for his fortress. Quickly we go to see Li Chuang, who is meeting with the rest of his group, who scold him for having failed the mission to take the Rongxing Garden. He tries to defend himself, explaining that Li had a rifle, and that was what made all the difference in the combat. But his boss doesn't believe him, because he was facing a simple policeman, and it shouldn't be possible for him to have a weapon of that caliber, least of all in the conditions they are in. Li Chuang continues to defend his position, and encourages everyone to go to the building in person, to verify that he is not lying. However, his bosses kick him and order him to leave before they infuriate them more. Grudgingly, Li Chuang accepts and leaves. One of them, called Akai, doesn't stop thinking that they have suffered several losses thanks to Li Chuang. So he suggests that the best option is simply get rid of him. This surprises the other men on the board a little, but not entirely, since they know that he has been after Li Chuang's woman there. Suggests that they will share her when they get rid of him, to which Everyone ends up agreeing to wait for the perfect opportunity. What none had noticed is that Li Chuang was hiding to hear everything, and now he no longer trusts them. As a result, as soon as he returns home, he begins to destroy everything he finds in his path. Kinji appears to ask him what's wrong and try to calm him down with her beauty. But Li Chuang orders her to hurry up and pack everything they have. She does not understand why they have to leave so quickly in the middle of the apocalypse, to which Li Chuang warns her that probably they can no longer stay in this place any longer, and they need to prepare as much as possible for the problems that are coming. Li Chuang calls his assistant to give orders to bring the men who are left to fight and meet at midnight to carry out their plan, all while Kinji watches him with distrust and fear. We go back to the protagonist and his group, who after a long trip, arrive at his fortress, and nothing more getting off the bus. Shan's son marvels at how big it is. Shoyan's home. After having brought the survivors from the guard, Rongxian, the protagonist, gets the reward for his mission. But having exceeded the necessary amount of people, he receives more points as a reward, reaching a total of 66. Getting off the bus, he asks to get him south of the city tomorrow night. This attracts the attention of Captain Li, who asks the reason for this. Shoyan has in mind to settle accounts with Li Chuang and Kinji for what they did to him in his past life. But he doesn't tell the captain. As soon as he is alone in his room, he opens the store system. Now that he has many more points, he can open the level 2 box that offers him a supply of dark technology. And now the only thing the protagonist can hope for is that this reward does not disappoint him. After opening the high-tech box, the protagonist receives a potion that increases his physical ability by 20 points, demonstrating right from the start that this box is worth every single point he spent on, and that it is much better than a level 1. When using it, a flash of light occurs in the room, and when analyzing well, he realizes that 33 points of physical ability result in 6 times the potential of an average person, which means that right now, he is much stronger than a normal human. At that moment, a mosquito passes near Xiaoyan. This to test his new abilities, decides to make it a kung fu master and catch it in mid-flight. But it turns out that he is so precise and agile that he manages to hold it by the legs with enough gentleness as not to crush it shortly after he lets it go, satisfied that he has been able to achieve such a feat with much ease. Moments later, we see the protagonist's friends practicing shooting in the courtyard, moment in which he appears heading for the bus, which attracts the attention of Captain Li. The latter asks him if he plans to go to the south of the city, as he had said before, and Shoyan confirms that yes he will, and that he also takes Gon with him. It seemed that Captain Li was going to offer to go with him, but instead he only asks him what orders he has for him. Apparently he has already recognized him as his absolute leader, and does not plan to question any of his decisions. Shoyan knows that after him, the person with the best aim in the shelter is Li, for which he orders him to stay, to help and train everyone else. In shooting, Captain Li understands, and without hesitation, assures that he will do a good job with the others. Having done this, the protagonist retires with Gon towards the bus, and minutes later, the two leave the shelter heading south of the city, where they plan to end the gang of thugs. In the Rongxin Garden, very soon it gets dark, and this time we go to the aforementioned garden, where we see Li Chuan along with the rest of his men, prepared for the action of this night. Li Chuan asks about where the others are, but his men assure that they are already in position and ready to execute the attack plan. He and the others go outside to start, but then a car turns on the lights to stop them. Here you can see a bunch of bandits, and inside the car, a man and a woman responsible for everything. Among all the crowd, one of the men appears armed with a pistol. It's Don, one of Li Chuan's bosses. The latter realizes that they are in danger, because this can only mean a trap, or something just as bad, and he wonders how they discovered them before they could even begin. As he still doesn't know if his plan has been revealed, he tries to play innocent and assure Don that they were just preparing to go to the Rongxin Garden in an attempt to conquer the area. Taking advantage of the darkness of the night and the calm of this, maybe they could achieve it while everyone was asleep. Tom questions them if they really planned to go to the Rongxin Garden, and then drops one of his men in the middle of the street. Another of Li Chuang's henchmen believes that it is his partner Kinzai, but his boss hits him to shut him up and make him notice that it is not his friend, but someone different. Li Chuang keeps trying to look innocent and ask who this person is, since he doesn't know him, knowing that a single mistake in his acting could mean the end for him and everyone else. Don't believe any of his words. So he decides to act and end this matter once and for all, ordering his men to shoot mercilessly at Li Chuang and his team. Finish the shots. Li Chuang realizes that among his own, he is the only one alive, but he still believes he has a chance to feign innocence, since there is still no proof of what he plans to do. So he confusedly asks Dawn, what is he doing? And that he does not know the man he threw in the middle of the street. Dawn is tired of pretending, so he asks Li Chuang to look carefully at who is inside the car. When looking better through the light of the spotlights, he realizes that for his bad luck, Kinji is sitting next to the leaders of the bandit group. One of them tells him that she has already revealed everything about his plan of betrayal to the association, and that is why they have gone to stop him. Li Chuang can't believe that this woman has betrayed him, but if we think about it well, she can do that with anyone who no longer serves her. While he complains and tries to reach her to take revenge, the High Command decides how to end this problem, to which Sang gives the order to simply cut this weed, or rather leave it as a hanging decoration. That way, shortly after they take Li Chuang, and he finds his end because of a rope. We go to the protagonist and Gon, who are arriving at the lair of the bandits, finding the body of Li Chuang. But fortunately for him, they appeared in time to see him still alive. Upon seeing him, the protagonist remembers what he did to him in his past life, and how he would like him to stay there, to receive his punishment. However, he feels a little bad that he is not the one who gives it, so using a stone, he cuts the rope. Being his old enemy on the ground, Shoyin kneels next to him, calling him dog, but suggesting him to make a truce, so that he can take revenge on the bandits and, by the way, help him finish off his entire group. But in that another of the leaders hears a commotion outside the room. Apparently the protagonist has already begun to act. The moment everyone realizes what is happening, when seeing the bodies on the ground, the protagonist appears out of nowhere in the window with an expression of indifference, indicating that he is ready to finish with all those present, even if he has to do it the hard way. Instantly use his knife and use it to cut his neck to the first enemy he encounters, which falls to the ground as fast as the protagonist enters the room. Zhang is terrified to see this and asks who he is, but Yingxi recognizes him as his ex-Xiaoyan, and like her boyfriend, she can't believe what they see. The protagonist does not give them time to react and throws his knife directly toward Zhang, which he cannot react in time to dodge it, so he ends up falling defeated before even doing anything to defend himself. At the same time as the protagonist's ex can only see this from the bed, crying disconsolately and terrified at being defenseless. When seeing the protagonist, she asks him why he does this and what is his objective. But Xiaoyan only laughs to see her tied to a bed, thinking that she should have been having a good time before he arrived. This makes him very funny, because he had been wondering what Li Chuang would think when seeing her with another man, when supposedly she would be only for him. Hearing this makes Yingxi nervous, because she did not expect her previous prey to discover. And at that moment the protagonist opens a door, through which Li Chuang enters converted into a zombie, and without thinking, attacks the protagonist's ex to start eating her from the neck. Yingxi before this asks for help from the protagonist, scared because this is her end, and tries to apologize for everything she did to him. However, Shou Yin had enough of her lies, so he slowly leaves the apartment, where they're enjoying every moment, in which his ex receives her just desserts, leaving her alone for her previous man to eat her to the last bite. How if she died? A while later it gets dark, and he meets with Gon, ordering him to use the bodies of those who were left in the street, so that he eats them. His zombie friend understands what he means, so he approaches the bodies of the fallen to begin his banquet. But while he does that, the protagonist uses his abilities to listen to what is happening in another of the nearby buildings. Then we see a lot of people trapped in a kitchen, to which a chef arrives with an unfriendly face, and this is accompanied by a man with a large knife, the latter holding a girl, mentioning that her skin is soft and her meat is tender, which causes the little girl to start screaming in fear. When being held by the man, the head chef tells him that they can't use her because she is too skinny. So instead he directs his gaze at a more filled boy. The mother of this one realizes that they chose him and denies him, in the fear that they are going to take him with them. the chef grabs the boy by the wrist, but his mother starts screaming, desolate because he lets him go, and tries to cling to him. But the chef bursts with anger and hits her, with which he throws her to the ground, while the boy is going to help his mother. This begs the chef to forgive him because he is just a child, and after that, begins to ask for help to the rest of the people who are present there, appealing to their compassion. But none of them even turn around to see how all this happens, indicating that in a certain way, they agree with everything that is happening. At that moment, a rumble occurs at the door, which attracts everyone's attention, so they prepare to fight. The chef, too, notes that the marks on the door are shotgun shots and wonders who could have one in the middle of the zombie apocalypse, to which one of his men answers that only the boss could have one. But then it doesn't make sense that they attack them. While the men prepare to fight, the boy returns with his mother. She is relieved that she has been able to save herself from them, at least for now. The door begins to open slowly, and the chef orders one of his cooks to go see what's going on. The latter does not want to, but his boss forces him to move, to inspect the situation. In this way, the man takes a pistol and approaches the door slowly, only to be caught by a zombie's hand, which pulls him out and alerts the rest, who prepare their pistols to defend themselves. Everyone begins to shoot through the wooden door, but the zombie moves away from the bullets, passing through the wall doors. The men try to follow him, but their enemy is much faster and more elusive than they are. The zombie in question turns out to be Gon, who enters the place noisily, breaking one of the windows, boarded up with an animal growl. As soon as he does it, he pounces on the head chef, takes him by the neck, and with his inhuman strength, twists it backwards. When landing, he doesn't lose a second, and throws himself like a wild beast towards those who remain, who can do nothing but scream, terrified before an enemy, which they cannot defeat. At the end of the fight, the only one left standing is Gon, which inspires a lot of fear in the people left, who think they're next on his list. However, when seeing him carefully, they understand that this zombie is different from the others, thinking he has some problem, different from wanting to eat them. The protagonist appears at that moment, who was impressed that, even with chains and a mask, he is so dangerous that a group of armed men could not with him. Gon even gives himself the luxury of boasting, calling himself cool and elegant. The fact that a zombie can speak scares the people in the room. Gon remains silent when he realizes what he has just done, but although he remains still doing nothing, the rest of the people around him do not feel comfortable seeing a zombie, unless when they discover that this is intelligent enough to speak. The protagonist approaches them to calm the situation, asking everyone not to be afraid, since Gon will not attack them. One of the women is still distrustful of the monster, since he is a zombie, that is a creature that attacks and devours humans, without even hesitating or blinking. Shou Yin understands that words are not going to be enough to convince these people, but he also realizes that she and her daughter have seen something similar to Gon before, so he comes closer to ask them, confirming his suspicions. He asks them then, where was it that they saw such an intelligent monster? And the woman answers that in the decoration market, east of the city. This fills the protagonist with concern, because he did not expect the modified zombies to appear so soon, and in fact he believed that it would take at least 1 or 2 months before they evolved to that level. Besides that, the decoration market is not far from the old Tea City. Gon is confused by how much they are saying, so he approaches them to ask what's going on. The protagonist replies that, like him, he is a mutant and rare zombie. The level of rationality of zombies usually varies, which increases the hunting efficiency beyond what a normal zombie can achieve, which is why mutants tend to be more dangerous, since their bodies adapt better when it comes to devouring humans. However, these changes are not usually stable, for which most of those who manage to reach that point become dangerous and out of control. Hearing this fills Gon with fear, since he has no idea what will happen to him if he keeps mutating. The protagonist places his hand on his shoulder to calm him, telling him that he is one of the lucky few who did not lose his human mind, and also that with him by his side, he will not let him lose his sanity. Leaving this topic aside, the protagonist returns with the civilians to ask if there are more survivors in the area of the Villu Villa. They respond that there are still many people locked in the sales office and in the basement. Yin, along with the rest of the people, begins to walk through the place. Finding something disturbing, he discovers that these people hunt the survivors who are nearby, and then they massacre them. He wonders if this is the reason why there are no survivor camps in the southern city. But what confuses him the most is because they take the lives of so many people, since they should not be able to eat so much meat. One of the survivors informs him that they transfer the surplus to other places, but he does not know to which or how many of them there are. Yin knows approximately how many places there are and reaches to the conclusion that they cannot eat all the meat, so they must be feeding the zombies. He asks then to tell him about the sales office they mentioned. The man from before answers him that it is near the south gate, more or less 1 kilometer from where they are, and that's where the captured people are taken. But those who are eliminated are sent to this site so that they massacre them. Upon hearing this, the protagonist's system window is activated, giving him a new mission, which consists of expanding the community and offers 20 points as a reward. We go to see the sales office, where 2 men are nervous because they heard that there were shots at the north door, but one of them attributes it that they must be practicing shooting with living people. The moment they get careless, Gon appears behind them, and before they can resist, he easily eliminates them. A group of girls inside the apartment hear the commotion, and one gets scared because she thinks it is better that they do what they want of her than that the zombies enter to eat them or convert them. At that moment, the door opens, and although the girl thought that the monsters were entering, in reality, it was just the protagonist, who asks all those present to come out with him. A while later, he is accompanied by a group of survivors among them. A girl he saved, she asks him if he is really willing to provide everyone with a safe place. The protagonist promises them that it will be so, on the condition that each and every one of them work to maintain it. This is not a problem for the survivors, since they are all healthy and ready to do it. The protagonist then does not waste time and takes them all in his bus, arriving at his shelter on the outskirts of the city. His friends see him from one of the towers, but they notice that he did not go directly to the doors, so they decide to wait to see what he does. The protagonist, while presenting the fortress to everyone, but warns that he cannot let them in yet. This confuses some of the survivors, since they do not know where they will live. But Yin prepared cabins in advance, with a wire fence around, to serve as a temporary shelter, since it is better than the area near the city. Since in this old tea city, there are still many buildings and open space, they need time to be able to improve and renew the living conditions. But the people in front of him are not worried about this, and only thank the protagonist for being so generous with them. The next morning, a woman arrives at the garden, Rongxian annoyed that Shang has not answered her, and instantly she realizes that something is wrong, enters the building, but only to discover that all the workers there have been converted into zombies. Li Chuang tries to attack her, but the woman, with one hand, takes care of him, and with a knife eliminates all the walkers. Her bodyguard asks her what they should do, since now Xinzhang doesn't know what to do with the meat. The woman explains that they will take care of it themselves from now on, but before that, she wants to take care of whoever has messed with them, even if she has to do it on her own. The name of this woman is Sim, and when leaving the building, her bodyguard informs her that there is not a single survivor left in the area. She is not interested in knowing that, and instead she asks him what happened to the meat. The man replies that the meat is still in place, so she orders him to bring it and load the truck to leave, while he and the rest of his men start loading the truck. Sim remains to one side watching the place until she notices something on the ground. She has found some very clear tire marks on the ground, and she wonders who could have achieved this and what ability is needed to do it, since apparently she has realized a possible clue to find her prey. On the other hand, the protagonist checks the mission because he doesn't know how to increase the community rating, but the idea comes at the figure of the population must be a key factor for this, thanks to the fact that whoever sold him the land underestimated him. Back then, he has enough land to admit a lot of people inside his shelter, but now he must take care of something else. And for that, he goes down to the temporary shelters of the survivors that he brought recently. The people, when seeing him, recognize him and call him savior, throwing themselves near him to praise him and thank him for having helped them when they needed it. The protagonist feels a little uncomfortable with this adoration that they do to him, but does not prevent him from asking the woman from before, where she saw the mutant zombie. She replies that in a Gorenfa market, near the decoration city, and that he found it while looking for supplies with his group. But then they ran into that monster, and as a result, several people ended up losing their lives amidst the chaos and fear. Everyone's separated. As a result, she and her daughter escaped from the scene, and they met with the people of Mount Villu, thinking erroneously at that time that they were safe from any danger. Although, it did not take long to realize that the people of that place were just as horrible as the walkers. The protagonist recognizes the place that the woman mentions, but at that moment, they arrive to consult him about the supplies. For her part, Chan Chan believes that they have enough supplies to survive a while, and not. It is necessary to risk with that monster to get more. However, Sanchi knows that these will eventually run out, sooner or later, so they should be looking for more before they really need them. The protagonist thinks that the main problem is that the decoration city is less than 2 kilometers from them, so they must face that monster so that it does not threaten their safety. Hearing this scares the woman, who asks the protagonist not to go, because she knows what that monster is capable of. But Shoyin asks her to calm down, since he knows what they are doing. That said, he asks Sanchi to look for Uncle Chan, because they're going to face that monster. We go to see the city, where a group of survivors is approaching a market. Among them, one begins to bother the others, because he was right to guide them. Even so, another of his companions is pessimistic about it, since they could have been cleaned up by other people. The leader asks him to have some hope, since everyone they looked for before had something stored. The group enters, confident that they can do whatever it takes to survive. But upon entering, they find that the entire market is empty and has already been looted. The leader, named One, hits a pan against the wall, trying to call survivors. But this only attracts zombies, which are easily eliminated among all. Seeing that there are only a few, the group thinks that the main horde must have been attracted by the last group of scavengers and believe they are lucky, because then they will have no one to bother them in their looting. While crossing the place, the mutant zombie finds them and detects fresh prey. The group arrives at a store where there are some supplies, and they even find a bed that Wong likes, and does not think twice before letting himself fall on. The entire group celebrates having found this place and decide to settle here. Directly from how happy they are, 2 of them decide to go out to smoke. One asks his friend if they are really going to stay, but the latter replies that the mall has too many entrances, so it hinders the defense. Also, it will definitely attract others. Before he can continue speaking, the mutant zombie appears out of nowhere and pierces him with his claws, terrifying the other man, while imagining how delicious it will be to eat them. The man flees scared, alerting his friends, but he can't escape the mutant, who also pierces him and splits him in 2. The group panics and begins to flee, but the monster is much faster, so he jumps on them to hunt them one by one. As they run, the monster kills more and more of them, but the only one left is Juong, who stumbles at the last second, being at the mercy of the monster. However, at that moment, someone else appears at the exit, with whom he has come to face the monster. Wong thinks that this is another zombie who wants to eat her, but when she tries to cover herself, Gon simply passes by her side, ignoring her completely. While this happens, the protagonist approaches her and asks her not to be afraid, while Anchi accompanies him. This girl recognizes him as the man who bought the property in the Tea City, and he remembers that she is the seller from before, as well as her name. However, at that moment, a horrific rumble occurs, and she realizes that it is the monster from the mall. She shouts at them to flee before it catches them, but the protagonist calms her, explaining that that monster will be retained. She turns to see the interior of the place, and is surprised by what she finds. Gon is stopping the claw, the mutant zombie, who believes he wants to keep all the glory for himself. Shoyin asks him if he can handle it alone, and Gon assures him that he will at least try. The fight begins, and the mutant zombie takes distance from a jump, happy that finally he has met someone of his same species for the first time. Then he jumps forward to try to finish off Gon with a swipe, but he dodges it by taking a step back. The mutant wonders if eating among those of his own species will make them evolve faster, so he will use Gon to test that theory. But before he can react, Gon throws a punch straight to his face, which the mutant receives fully, crashing against the ground. Recognizing that, Gon is a much better fighter than he seems. The latter raises his leg and crushes him with a kick while he is on the ground, but the mutant reacts in time to jump and cling to the roof, dodging the blow. This tells him that the strength that he has accumulated hunting this time can finally use it, since he has someone that won't break so easily. Gon cannot believe what he sees, but the mutant pounces on him with a maniacal emotion, beginning to move frantically everywhere, demonstrating unmatched power and speed for Gon. This worries Sanchi a lot, who asks the protagonist, how is it that there is a zombie so strong as to rival Gon? For his part, Xiaoyan realizes that it was a good idea to come early, because if the mutant is at this level now, letting him hunt for longer would have made him a very serious threat for his entire shelter. Knowing this, he takes out a rifle from his inventory, which leaves Wang surprised, because she does not understand how he did it. As if it were magic, the protagonist begins to aim and asks Gon to help him, promising that if he does, he will not make fun of him later. Having said this, Gon grabs the mutant by the wrists to immobilize him. In this way, Shoyin can have a precise shot towards his head, and the zombie, upon receiving it, falls backwards. The bullet was not enough to kill him, but the zombie recognizes that it hurt him quite a bit and gets angry about this, promising that he will destroy him as soon as he has the opportunity. Seeing this, Sanchi gets even more scared because the mutant zombie's brain received a direct shot, but it has not yet fallen like the rest of its species, which makes him a very serious threat for any survivor. The protagonist does not waste time with this surprise and releases a burst of fire on the mutant's body, who can only scream and growl as he begins to fill with holes. After a while of emptying the magazine, the monster falls defeated to the ground, barely staying alive. The protagonist asks Gon to try to eat this mutant, and in doing so, the mission to expand the community appears, indicating that the score of this has increased, thanks to the fact that he saved Wang and eliminated a dangerous element. The protagonist wants to take advantage of having come here to explore and empty the supermarket, which takes Wang by surprise in an instant. Shoyin activates his magic to store everything around, leaving even Sanchi impressed, who had not seen this magic until now. Apart from this, he wants to take care of the bodies before they mutate, so he asks Gon to eat them if he still has an empty stomach. We go back to see Sim again, who asks to stop the truck near the protagonist's shelter, and her guard observes Chan Chan at the top of a watchtower. In addition to a lot of survivors in the temporary cabins, the guard believes that the only advantage they have is that their lair is well built, which makes them wonder, how is it that they finished with Sam and the others? Sin thinks they made a stealth attack and used the zombies to take care of them, since the villa was not safe as a base. She believes herself fortunate that now they were able to find a new base. But before taking it, she asks to regroup with the rest of her group to bring more weapons and people next time. While they leave, Guang learns, thanks to Sanchi, of all the advantages of the protagonist's fortress, and that it even has hot water to bathe in. On the way, Shou Yin notices a car ahead, and Sanchi prepares his rifle. The two vehicles cross paths, as well as the protagonist glances, and without activating a new mission. After the first encounter with his new enemy, the protagonist receives a notification from the system about a new mission called the Nemesis Villain. Volume 1. The requirement of this mission is to resist the invasion and offers 50 points as a reward. Xiaoyan Tian does not understand what is meant by an invasion, but then he realizes that it was about the woman he saw before. Shortly after they arrive at their fortress in the Tea City, and there he meets with Chan Chan to ask her if she has seen any strange people. While he was out, she informs him about a car they saw passing in the distance nearby, but that as it returned where it came from, she imagined that they would only be people trying to escape the chaos of the city. But seeing the intrigue of the protagonist, she asks him if there is something wrong with this, beginning to suspect that something went unnoticed. Xiaoyan Tian orders her to call Uncle Zen and Old Li to gather everyone, since he has an important announcement to make to them. A while later we go to see the Southern District, where the coal plant is located. Here we see a group of men listening to a radio, where it is announced that they have found survivors. And this is the place where everyone is going to meet to plan the attack. Shortly after, Sin and her people appear, realizing that these are the reinforcements that they heard about. of their discovery, and they came to join in their attack plan. Just by seeing her, all those present are smitten by her beauty. But this does not matter to her in the least. And as everyone arrived right on time, she asked them to follow her and the others. The men accept, but Sin warns them that the site they are going to is not that far away, and that since the car cannot carry so many people, it is better that they go walking. But while she explains this to them, the men do not stop looking at each other with disturbing smiles. Shortly after they arrive at what appears to be a warehouse, where one of the men is surprised by the large amount of space there is, and considers together with his group that they finally found a shelter in which to stay. The one who seems to be the leader mentions that he wants to go to the bathroom, so he warns that he will go out for a moment, to later return with the whole group. Before he does, Sin warns him that in this place they have running water, and that he does not need to go outside. And she prepares to guide him through the place to show him, making the leader of the other group very happy. After a while, the two are together in the bathroom. But what he did not expect was that from one moment to another, if she betrayed him and stabbed a knife in his neck, letting him fall to the ground like a rag doll, without any emotion. This makes her a little disappointed, because she had hoped that it would be a good catch. But sadly, it turns out that in the end it is just another waste, although it doesn't matter too much to her. When leaving the bathroom, her partner warns her that they have already finished with the whole group, and she asks him to take care of the one she left in the bathroom. And we see that they have exterminated all the men that they brought to the base. Then, Sin orders them to call number 2 and number 3 so that they take care of this. Returning to the protagonist's fortress, he meets with a large group of survivors and tells them that someone has marked them as their target. As if that were not enough, Cheyenne warns them that they also know nothing about their enemies. So from now on, they could expect a surprise attack at any moment. After informing this, he asks Sanchi and Gon to accompany him to clean the construction incomplete of the southwest, since they will move the shelters there temporarily, because otherwise they will become cannon fodder during one of the attacks, and many could be injured, if not worse. Chan Chan and Shao Kai asked that he also let them go to help, as well as everyone else present there. Even one of the children wants to offer his help to defend the city, but his mother denies it because he is still small. With this whole atmosphere, one ends up giving in to the pressure of the environment and offers to help too. Although unlike the others, she doubts quite a bit whether to do it. The protagonist informs everyone that the area should be relatively safe, so he leaves Uncle Zheng and Old Li to remain on guard, while the rest can go with him to make other preparations. Shortly after, Xiaoyan, Tian, and his entire combat squad are ready to advance, arriving at the construction of the southwest area that he had said before. Once inside, everyone begins to eliminate the zombies they find, but they finish faster than expected, and fortunately, none of those present were injured or infected. The protagonist knows that in the following days, they could be attacked at any moment. So for now, they will settle in this construction, from where they can see the main shelter. The survivors assure the protagonist that they can fight, and that they want to contribute to help defend the shelter. But Xiaoyan thinks that it is better only to prepare. So, he orders the survivors to clean the area first, but to carry some pistols and magazines, just in case, in addition to transmitters with which to communicate. To follow his orders, we go back to see Shin, who is with her group loading everything for the attack. And that 2 men appear, who think everything is going well. But her boss assures them that it is not so, since they have had many problems lately. So they must get food as soon as possible. With this new operation, the boys ask her who is responsible for this, and she explains that it was the survivors, who are in the protagonist's fortress, but that the next day she will take number 2 to lead the team too and coordinate the attack. At night, we see the protagonist again, who has 46 points to spend, and when reviewing the system store, he finds new products. Among them, there are some level 2, and despite the fact that buying everything would cost him 40 points, he decides to give it a try. The first thing he obtains after the purchase is an ability called Force Overload, level 1, which allows you to increase personal stats by 25 for 100 by one time. But once the effect ends, the user of the ability will enter a state of weakness. Cheyenne Tian analyzes that if he uses this ability, have 33 points in strength, then it could rise to 40 with the ability activated, which is equivalent to unleashing a force 8 times greater than that of an average person. Knowing this makes him so excited that he can barely wait to test his new ability. Meanwhile, Shin is on his way to the fortress with her entire group of thugs, moment in which her companion asks her for instructions for the attack. She asks him to transmit the strategy of combat to everyone else, which consists of driving through the refugees that are on the outside and exterminate as many of these as they find on the way. Once number 2 starts knocking down and breaking the door, everyone will use the modified vehicle as a cover for suppressing fire. Number 2, when hearing this, gets very excited because he is hungry and craves to eat human meat. Again, the group keeps moving forward, and while in the protagonist's fortress, we see that he and Old Lee are waiting at the top. Lee marks to the protagonist that, although this site is well hidden, it has much worse visibility than the watchtower, since the blind spots along the wall are huge. However, Xiaoyan Tian clarifies that this site is not for surveillance, but this confuses Old Lee more, because he does not know what the protagonist wants it for. Then Xiaoyan Tian remembers that once he told him that he had worked as a sniper for some years. Lee clarifies that he was confused, and that it was only a few months, since it was a temporary contract. Despite this, the protagonist asks him if he can hit a shot at a distance of 100 or 200 m. Before this, Lee asks him not to underestimate him and confident. He promises him that, as long as the wind is not too strong, he can hit a shot, even on a mark of 500 meters. That is more than enough for the protagonist. And at that moment, Sanchi appears with the things he asked for, showing himself extremely tired because the box he has, whatever it is extremely heavy. Lee has an idea of what it is, and when Xiaoyan Tian opens it, he realizes that it is neither more nor less than a rifle. Barrett. Lee knows very well that no matter how skilled the protagonist is, this is not a weapon that anyone could have in their hands. So he asks him where he found it, to which Xiaoyan Tian ignores the question and informs him that he only has 2 magazines, which makes a total of 10 rounds. So he must use them very carefully and precisely, so as not to miss a single shot. Old Lee understands how important this mission is, just having the rifle in his hands, but he still doesn't feel comfortable holding it. Leaving this aside, the protagonist asks if everyone else is ready, and Sanchi informs him that they are already prepared, confirmed that the shelter is ready for any attack. He asks everyone to warn, stay alert, since the enemy could attack at any moment. It is just at that moment that Chan Chan manages to see something unusual approaching and informs the others of this. Old Lee immediately catches the message and gets into a shooting position before the enemy attack. Meanwhile, Sim's guard notes that the refugees outside the wall are not there and believes that they could have been massacred by the meat. Also, the driver asks if they should stop the car to better observe the situation, but Sim orders him to go straight towards his target, since if they discover them, then the attack will become much more difficult. Before this, all the units charge at once against the fortress, seeking to use the wall as cover for the shots. It is at that moment that Chan Chan warns that the enemies entered the firing range, and all the survivors who are at the top begin to empty the magazines against them. Sin's cars are hit by bullets, and one of the drivers receives the attack, skidding his car until it crashes against a tree. Sin can't believe they have been seen so soon, believing that it is something impossible. But even so, she and those who remain continue to advance through the rain of bullets, looking for cover behind the wall. Luckily, they manage to arrive to cover themselves from the shots, and their number 2 comes out with a circular saw, eager to take the lives of the survivors. He begins to use the saw to knock down the door, which Shan Chan notices in time, so she orders everyone to start shooting at him. Sin realizes that they have changed the target, so she orders her group to attack them too, to protect number 2. With this, they manage to push Chan Chan back and injure Xiao Kai. Sanchi warns everyone that their enemies have firearms as strong as theirs, so they must be much more careful than expected. Despite this, they are not afraid of the attack, because unlike their enemies, they have a large amount of ammunition. However, the main problem is that number 2 is cutting the main door, and they know that as soon as it falls, they will be at a disadvantage. The good thing is that the protagonist already has a plan in case this happens, so he runs out immediately to put it into operation, while Sin's group begins to have problems, because they have already used half of the ammunition. Luckily for them, number 2 is almost finished. And at that very moment, the main door opens. So Chan mobilizes everyone to protect the door and not allow number 2 to enter. This is a stroke of luck for Sim, because now they will have to deal with an evolution. She guides them all behind number 2 to use him as cover while they enter the fortress. The latter begins to force the entrance, but Xiaoyan Tian warns Ali to be ready and wait for his signal. He marks to number 2 and orders him to shoot. Number 2 enters roaring furiously to the fortress, and everyone gets scared, thinking if he is even still human. Out of fear, they begin to shoot at him almost point blank. But the bullets do not do any damage to the monster, but not because it is resistant to them, but because it can regenerate after each bullet impact. And Uncle Zen realizes this, but Sin also notices his surprise and understands that everyone present have never faced an evolution. This is why they warn Lee about his healing ability. So smaller weapons cannot eliminate him. So it's his turn to attack. The old man shoots his rifle, and as soon as the bullet touches the head of number 2, it explodes along with the entire upper part of his body, making him fall defeated to the ground. Shiny, her group, cannot believe that from one moment to another, things have changed. So much because they did not believe it possible that someone could defeat their monster. She realizes that the people of the fortress, they managed to have high-caliber weapons, but that doesn't make sense to her. The protagonist places himself right behind them and begins to empty the magazine of his rifle, putting Shin in even more danger. Her men, when being surrounded, she realizes that they failed in the calculations by underestimating the strength of their prey. So the only option they have left now is to run back to the vehicles and attempt to retreat. In the midst of the escape, she realizes that the protagonist is the same guy she saw in the car a little while ago, and just before Xiaoyan Tian shoots her, she does not hesitate to take one of her men and use him as a human shield to protect herself. The protagonist realizes that her reaction speed is beyond normal and believes that she is also an evolution. Sin throws the body of her partner towards the protagonist, but he also dodges it by taking a step to the side. In doing this, he loses Sin for a second, but that is more than enough for her to approach her van. Being about to escape, Old Lee realizes what Sim is doing, so he points his rifle at her to stop her. And at the moment of shooting, he manages to hit her in the leg, splitting it in two. That must have been a failure, is enough to stop Sim in her place, if not because her guard was in the vehicle, and helps her up to later start the escape from the fortress. Unfortunately, she and her guard manage to escape despite the rain of bullets, and this makes everyone fear that they will return seeking revenge. But Xiaoyan Tian does not see problems with this, because the Nemesis villain mission has been a success, and between this and other rewards, he now has a total of 76 system points. Also, not only that, but thanks to the second part of the mission, he now knows where his base is located, all thanks to a marker, and it turns out that the objective of the mission is now to attack and eliminate the enemies they find. After this, the shelter celebrates that they managed to defend themselves successfully, but the protagonist is more worried if there is any problem among his people. Fortunately, they all survived, but there are some people injured by the shooting, so he sends them all to the medical room, ordering them to disinfect them immediately, and that they move the bodies of the enemies that remain towards the freezer so that Gon devours them. He also orders that after doing all this, they must bring back the refugees from the abandoned construction, since now the area is safe to be inhabited again. With this wave of enemies, the protagonist obtained 76 points, and he wants to squander them all during the night. Returning with Sin, she finally arrives at her shelter, where her men help her walk. But one of those who receives her asks what happened. She explains that they were very careless, because they didn't think their targets would have heavy weapons in his arsenal. Sin gets angry and orders them to bring human meat immediately. But one of the men only sees her with an evil smile. Despite this, she continues to insult them, calling them useless and ordering them to do what she says. Right now, the man returns the insult and throws in her face that despite having fallen to this level, she still acts as if she were superior to them. Sin understands that they are rebelling against her, taking advantage of the fact that she is now injured, and that number 2 is not with her. So, she orders her guards to eliminate them before they attack, but they do nothing, and understands that she has been left alone The guy from before points out that she is seriously injured and no longer has number 2 to protect her. So he is the strongest around here. Not to mention that the men by his side have put up with her for too long, and they're already tired of that. Little by little, Sin begins to be surrounded by those who were once her followers. But she continues to warn them not to be confident, because even though she is injured, she is still their leader. Unfortunately for her, in a matter of seconds, she ends up being completely cornered by the rebellion, and as soon as she sees that she has no escape, the guy from before raises his iron rod, laughing and preparing to eliminate the one that once was her boss.